Hello? There we go. Hello. Oh, it's been a while. Can you tell? Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Welcome, welcome. Hello, hello. Let me begin first by saying hello to everyone who's here. Hello. You're Ura Rura. Hello, Jacob. Hello, King. Hello, Clockwork. Welcome, welcome. Hope video editing is going well. Hello, Tranquil. Hello, Hungary. Hello, Kaizen. Hello, Nikki. Welcome, welcome. Hello, I'm a God and E10. And Satan, sorry. Hello, Rian. Who else is here? Hello, a person in a place at a time. Welcome, welcome. Hello, Grocery Wolf. Hello, hello. Hello, Adam. Yeah, all right. Hello, the Krusty Lab. But you can say Ra. Okay, Ra. Great, great, great. Yeah. Today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over some of the content that I couldn't fit into the video because I was getting to realize that the entire video was getting very long. And even though it's still 30 minutes, there's still large chunks of content that I had to remove because I felt like it was interrupting with pacing. But really what this stream is going to be about today is I really just wanted to turn on the microphone and chat with all of you because while video editing is fun and I really do enjoy making content, there's something a lot more basal, human, I don't know, connective when it comes to turning on a mic and just talking. Because, content creation can be kind of lonely sometimes when you are just working on your own. Although in this case, I was not working on my own, of course. I was working with Clockwork behind the scenes. And, at some point we'll probably talk about what that was like because, boy, did this pair of viruses really make life difficult for the two of us. uh, all right. Coming to you live from me frantically putting together a cut of a partner piece entirely focused on HPV. Yeah, these two viruses were crazy, HPV and HDV. I feel like every time, now that I'm in, because when I began my channel, I would say that I was very amateurish when it came to virology. Still am, right? I'm nowhere near a professional virologist. But I feel like at the beginning, I had only my basic training in molecular biology to go off of, and now having read very deeply about several different viruses, it only gets more confusing because I'm less able to ignore when things are weird. Yeah, and I think this was peak proof of that because I expected, I worked on this video before the dark protein video, and then I took a break from it because I didn't really like how it was going, and then I rewrote the entire thing. Which I thought went a lot better. I really liked the video that I did in it actually making. But I think a part of that is due to experience where I can hear the story I'm trying to tell and it doesn't register as very interesting. And then the rewrite made it a lot better, which I'm very happy with. Yeah. Do I plan on doing any more in HIV? Oh, for sure, for sure. The whole entire reason why I asked Toxo to even draw me a unique asset for HIV is that HIV will definitely get its own video. It is definitely one of the most complicated and interesting viruses. Even though I think as a kid, we were kind of oversaturated with HIV content or education because as a millennial neutrophil, we grew up in like the golden age of AIDS, HIV awareness. So we were always talking about HIV. And, when you're that young and you don't really know the broader context of biology, it can kind of seem that, HIV is this omnipresent, very unique virus. And it is, don't get me wrong, but I think when you're young and that's the only virus you get a deep dive on, it tends to like burn out your interest a little bit. I remember as a kid learning about HIV and being really interested, but then because of how thickly layered, there was no contrast, right? We didn't get to learn about other viruses. It was just HIV for my entire childhood. And so I got a little tired of it in a scholarly fashion, right? Not in terms of like a human, economic, humanitarian, social way, but just from the science side of it. I got very tired of it when I was a lot younger. And then I kind of rediscovered it in graduate school because it happened to coincide with what I was doing research in a very roundabout way, like in a way that I could have never expected. So yes, I will definitely talk about HIV. I think it's a fascinating virus. I just need a little more time because it is like, the cancer video, Yeah, I addressed this before, but like the reason why I felt uncomfortable doing cancer is because cancer affects so many people in such a deep way. Oh gosh, the chat frozen again. Hold on. Why does this keep on happening, OBS? Um, let's refresh that. There we go. There we go. Why does that keep on happening? Yeah. Where was I? Yeah, just HIV. Interesting. Definitely going to talk about it one day. Uh, it has left like a very deep scar on people's lives that continue to this day, although I feel more comfortable talking about it because of all the recent developments and actually cracking this case. When I was young, it felt like HIV was invincible, right? It destroys the immune system. How can you possibly treat something that destroys the immune system like that, right? But miraculously enough, through the grit and determination of scientists and doctors and humanitarians and you know all the work that goes into addressing these terrible diseases, there's some real nice progress, and I think that's very exciting. Yeah. Get back in the editing cave. I will. I have a bunch of life stuff that I need to do, so it'll be a little bit of time before the next video comes out. But I will say, as a teaser, the next video is going to be one that has been highly requested since essentially the beginning of my channel, and I'm finally going to get it, get to addressing it. Yeah. Do I have any tips to how to get an A in Gen Chem 1? Office hours, you know, office hours, extra, what is it? What are they called? Supplemental instruction, you know, those kinds of resources. I think Gen Chem 1, I actually did pretty okay in. It was Orgo that like destroyed me. And I think the reason why I found Gen Chem 1 to be okay was because, it played by rules that I was willing to accept. Whereas Orgo, I felt like I was unwilling to accept what was happening in Orgo, as weird as that sounds. Am I planning on doing any protists? So my expertise, as if you can call it that, is in like bacteria or eukaryotes of a higher order. And so protists are kind of in a weird middle ground where I'm going to do them eventually. I'm just, they're not very easy for me to think about, but definitely one day, definitely one day. I really want to do a video on lenacapavir too, but it gets super complicated real quick. I want to tackle that when I feel like I can also interview public health folks like Doctors Without Borders. So that's interesting. So much drama with how effective this drug is. You could say more about that. I'm not really entirely tuned into HIV in terms of treatment. Where I was most interested in and had overlap during graduate school was viral mechanisms. But like treatment, I actually have very little experience in. HIV/AIDS got to be treated like a joke by young people at the time. Yeah. I just think there's I mean, you have to understand, I think young people by their nature are subversive. You know, there's this whole thing about, you know, teenagers rebel, right? I think that's never going to be untrue about young people, right? The whole tension between a adolescent and their adult parent is a tension between establishing your own autonomy. And because teenagers are teenagers and don't have a whole lot of life experience yet, the default way to feel like you are in control and autonomous is to take a stance in opposition of, you know, in opposition to the adults around you. Which, you know, is a little reductive. I'm sure not all teenagers are like that, but I think generationally, you know, I was like that to a certain degree as well. You know, no amount of intelligence in a teenager, I think, prevents the emotional need for autonomy, to feel like you are self-sufficient and efficacious. And, you know, that's why I forgive the jokes. You know, a lot of edgelord humor in children, I think, is a way to assert a kind of independence away from the adults that are trying to help you. And, you know, as long as you grow out of that kind of stuff, I think it's fine. Yeah. Hello, Theon. Welcome. Hello, Text2. Welcome. I know it's been a while that you've mentioned bacteriophages, but so much research and progress has been done in the field. Do I plan to cover it? So I've talked to Clockwork and my Discord a lot about bacteriophages. There's like, in my Discord, there's an infinite paper backlog where I just post papers that I'm thinking about that are interesting. And I think probably a good 40% of all the papers that I post in that channel are about bacteriophages. It's just, I don't feel emotionally ready to do another entry in the phage wars. Part of that is because the first one did not do very well, but you know, that's understandable. It was one of my very first videos ever, the battle between CRISPR and anti-CRISPR. I don't think the video is very good, which is probably why I didn't do very well. But like, I love bacteriophages. Like the Phage War series, I think is going to be very, very good. I think I might need several 30-minute long videos to cover bacteriophages, but definitely for sure, I'm very, very happy to cover bacteriophages. It's just timing, you know. Do I plan on making a video on brain eating amoeba? Well, yeah, you'll just have to see. You just have to tune in. Someone in bio I talked with mentioned how badly HIV would be for humanity if it emerged in any other time that wasn't the modern age. Much to think about. I think that's fair. HIV is pretty wild. Would I ever consider doing a video on biologics along the lines of how tamping down an immune response cannot result in a massive infection type thing? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Lenacapavir interferes with the HIV capsid so well it basically puts HIV on the path to elimination, but manufacturers won't sell it to Doctors Without Borders for complicated business reasons. Drama. I'm less interested in corporate drama than I am about pure biology. I just feel like I'm not going to be good enough ever to make an intelligent comment or analysis on matters of humanity that are like that, which some might fairly argue that that's me being a bit of a coward, and I am, you know, because I don't want to dismiss business concerns out of pocket because somebody has to pay for this kind of stuff. But I also don't want to be like, well, business decisions are always right. You know, I don't have a good answer for those kinds of things. It's probably very complex and I'm not up to the challenge, but I'm glad that you are thinking about it because somebody should talk about it. It's just not going to be me. Yeah. Is that clockwork? Yes, it is. Yeah. The plague. One theory is that the Black Death accidentally selected for hyperactive immunity, which is why Europeans have a high rate of allergies. I did come across that hypothesis during my research into the Black Plague, which, if you didn't know, I already made a video on Yersinia pestis. I decided not to include it because I wasn't... I don't know. It's complicated, right? I'm not saying I'm the best in terms of following this rule of thumb, but like people, I don't want to... I want to be if I were to mention stuff like that, I want to be very careful to not open a path for people to self-diagnose, because it's tricky, right? I think I did a pretty good job in my recent video about Sjogren's disease in terms of like, we don't really know how this works. Here's a correlation, and the people in my comment section who do have Sjogren's appear to have taken that well in terms of like, oh, isn't that curious? Which should be the correct response, right? Oh, it's curious that Delta virus is in the salivary glands of people with Sjogren's, or some patients with Sjogren's, right? Not everybody with Sjogren's has Delta virus in their salivary glands, but some patients do. And the correct response is, isn't that curious? Instead of, oh my God, I have Delta in my salivary glands. So that's the trouble that you run into, right? Like if you have allergies and you're European, if I were to mention that, I don't want you to think, it's because of the Black Death, right? It's correlative, it's a model, and I feel like I try not to leave that much room for people to self-diagnose in that way, but I did come across it and it was kind of interesting. Yeah. I'm a bit curious as to how our body would react to non-harmful foreign matter like bacteriophages. Do we develop allergies on them? It's really complex. The whole immune tolerance thing is really complicated. I made a video on how the immune system can tell between good and bad bacteria, and a lot of that is context dependent, right? It's integrative. It's not so... The thing is that it has to be integrative, right? It can't be black and white because you are exposed to outside antigens literally all the time, right? Every time you breathe in some dust, some people will develop an allergic reaction, other people will be fine. Why is that? Some people will treat, their immune systems will treat dust their context of their immune system will evaluate dust to be more dangerous than other people's. And why is that? Well, I mean, that is a whole rabbit hole on its own. But in terms of if we would develop allergies to bacteriophages, you don't really have to worry about that. I'm pretty sure our gut microbiome is also full of them right now, living in homeostasis with the bacteria that already live in your gut. Yeah. Yeah. If I new subscriber here, welcome, welcome. I just graduated med school. Congratulations, doctor. And I'm so mad I didn't discover your channel earlier. Microbiology would have been a breeze. I don't know about that. You know, it's clear that you didn't need my channel, I'll put it that way. Microbiology might have been more fun to you, I think is true, but I wouldn't call myself a microbiology channel. I don't feel like I've earned the... I feel like if you were to call me a microbiologist, real microbiologists would be upset. So how would you address me? I think I am most comfortable being described as a cell and molecular biologist, which is true. Bacteria, like they all overlap, right? All these subfields do in fact overlap. But I always get a little antsy when I get called a microbiologist or when I have my content described as microbiology because it's technically true. But like, I don't know what all these bacteria stain for. I don't know if they're gram positive or gram negative. I don't know if they're catalase positive, catalase negative. If you're a real microbiologist who has a real microbiology education, you know everything about microbes. Whereas I know about them in the context of the immune system, which makes me more of a molecular biologist, or I would even be more comfortable, a little more comfortable being called an immunologist, even though I'm not really that either. It's just like the microbiology label. I'm always like, yeah, but like I really shouldn't be wearing that title. But yes, congratulations, Doc. That's not an easy accomplishment that you have pulled off, and very excited for you to be out there in the world helping patients. I saw a comment that was something to the effect of self-diagnosis is an important tool for people who may not easily have access to stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's not. So this is about personal comfort, right? Like, I don't want to be someone who enables self-diagnosis. I think that's fair. I'm personally uncomfortable with that. Getting people the knowledge that they need to go and seek actual medical care is for people like, Silver Theorist, right? Like an actual doctor. I'm just a guy who likes microbes and molecules. So I think there is some level of point there, but like me as a science communicator, I'm a little less comfortable stepping into those shoes. Did I see that thing about tattoo ink and immune response? I did. It might make an appearance when I do a deep dive on the macrophage. Although I don't know if I'll continue that series because my deep dive on the neutrophil didn't do that well. Or maybe I'll just have it lower on the priority list. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to say why some videos do well and some videos don't, because I think the neutrophil video is it's probably one of the most artistic things I've ever done on the channel. Like, I really loved making that video. And, you see this from YouTubers all the time, is that sometimes the piece that the YouTuber themselves really loves is often the one that is not very popular. Like upon release, right? I think with other videos that have funneled attention to my channel, the neutrophil video did then grow, but when I first released that video, it was like one of the worst performing videos on my channel, which was so depressing. So depressing. It'd be cool to do a tier list on disease movies like Contagion or Outbreak in a short. I want to completely move away from fiction. I know I like cut my teeth doing Plague Inc. and I don't regret doing it, but I just really want to move away from fictional sci-fi stuff, because I think I don't think I'm that special to be able to do that kind of work, right? I don't think there's anything about how I would cover it that would be different than any other biologist covering it. I don't think my voice is very unique in that aspect, because if anybody else wanted to do it, you have my blessing, right? Like, I don't think that's for me. I think my unique voice can be spent doing something else in a much more focused way. I want to take the time to address this, just because I have had repeated like, oh, did you see the new Plague Inc. DLC came out? Are you ever going to do the new Plague Inc. DLC? I'm like, I really don't want to be like the Plague Inc. guy anymore. I want to rebrand. I don't want to be dependent on, having to feel obliged to cover sci-fi. Not to say that your recommendation is bad, but like speaking as an artist, I don't feel very artful when I'm evaluating sci-fi, which I would much rather try to do this weird thing that I have been doing. Yeah. Is it me or is the audio balance slightly leftwards? I hope not. Everything looks okay on my end, although I can maybe try to speak more center into the microphone. The more informed you are, the better your chances of identifying a disease/condition. But the thing is, on my videos, I tell you vague symptoms, but not in a way. Like, the only reason why I tell you the symptoms of some of these is to just have the context of what this disease is. Like, if I talked about Sjogren's syndrome and then I didn't, it's Sjogren's disease. It has been officially reclassified to disease, and it was a slip up that I called it a syndrome in the actual script. But the reason why I gave the symptoms there is not so that anybody could self-diagnose, but just to be like, well, what is this disease? Well, it's this. It does this to people. But like a doctor would be much more able to communicate in a way where it is meant for self-evaluation and awareness, whereas mine is just, with people with fatigue, I don't want them to think I might have Sjogren's. I'm like, I don't know. If you have fatigue, you could have 1,000 other things that aren't Sjogren's, but please go see a doctor anyway. I don't know. It is interesting. It is interesting though. Yeah, especially in the US, where going to see a doctor is like not a trivial thing to do, put it that way. I have a friend that's in school for microbiology. I just linked her to this channel. I hope they find what I do is okay, right? Because again, I'm not a real like microbiome person. I'm a fraud. Can I do chemistry? No, I'm bad at chemistry. I'm very bad at chemistry. I was good at biochem, but that's because biochem is like, it's more conceptual, I would say, than raw chemistry, which is a lot more mathematical, much more based in physics. Biochem is a lot more based, it's like models and stuff, but to me, biochemistry was a lot more intuitive than raw chemistry. Yeah. Have I ever been in a pathology department in a hospital? If this YouTube thing doesn't work out, I might be a pathology lab tech. Right. Like, if this YouTube thing doesn't pay dividends, if I can't justify putting these 12-hour days into making content, because the channel's still not profitable with regards to like living expenses, but it's getting there. Right. I don't, this is not like a cry for support or whatever, right? I'm just letting you know honestly, but peek behind the scenes on what it's like being a YouTuber with this number of subscribers, with this number of views. Like, the bleeding of like money going into the channel has slowed dramatically, but there's still a possibility that I'm like, okay, I gotta take a step back and then like assess my chances realistically of whether or not this can become a full-time job. But I would love to like work in a pathology lab. I think looking at slides and looking at cells under a microscope is like, I mean, I would totally be happy doing that, I think. Yeah. I'm excited too. To be fair, the contextual info you're talking about is what makes the difference in the clinical settings that I can assure you that emphasis sets apart diagnosticians. Yeah. Like, when a doctor is communicating to you, they are, it sounds cruel, but it's not. They are manipulating you in a kind of way positively, right? In the sense where if I were to give you a list of symptoms, I don't have any context for how a patient might absorb that information, right? I would just tell you what I know, and then you are free to do with that information whatever you want. But a doctor who is in the room with the patient has to consider, okay, the patient can't freak out about this, right? I need to not only convey the information accurately, but also make sure that they walk away with a responsible understanding of their situation. And I'm unqualified to do that, which is why I don't want to embrace that kind of aspect of like talking about disease. When I talk about sci-fi adjacent things like speculative evolution or astrobiology, unfortunately, no. Astrobiology isn't really speculative in the same way that speculative evolution is, because astrobiology could be something real. I mean, there are parts of it that are real, right? Like, in terms of like experimenting with how microbes exist within conditions that are not on our terrestrial Earth, right? Like that's kind of to me in the realm of experimental biology and not really that speculative. But in terms of speculative evolution, I mean, talking about evolution in any kind of speculative manner is a little problematic. A little bit, you know, like I'm sure it can be done responsibly, but I personally don't feel comfortable with speculation in that regard. It's already hard enough, right? Like, because my goal as a content creator is to provide you with my graduate school experience, which is kind of a funny way to put it, but it is, right? I'm trying to be as like responsible with the information as possible. And what I found out in that last video where I complained about copyright is that a lot of people, even though I thought I was being careful with how I was describing copyright, and then I pinned a comment about copyright to be like, no, the paper is free. You can read the paper. I just can't redraw a graph. But then there are a lot of people in the comment section like not getting that and assuming that the paper itself is paywalled. And then somebody said that they reached out to the authors on my behalf to get the paper. I'm like, no, that's not what I meant, you know? And so I'm most comfortable when I have the guardrails on interpretation as high as physically possible, right? Because I think that is where I am most comfortable. And so anything having to do with speculative biology, it's fun, but like to me there's so much wonder in nature already that I don't really foresee myself doing speculative biology things, except for mirror life, which I will tackle eventually. But the reason why I have decided to do mirror life eventually is because there are some aspects of mirror life research that are not speculative, right? That are experimental, but not in the way that like, oh, they've created mirror life in a lab and there are experiments, but there are interesting experiments that recreate some aspects of mirror life that are informative to how our biology would react to mirror life, right? So it's like, you know, it's grounded somewhere, and I can put up the guardrails and clearly like say which parts are speculative and which parts aren't. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm just much more comfortable when there's less speculation. if that makes sense. Yeah. Will I discuss more paleo microbiology? Probably not, unless it's a part of a different story, because that's out of my realm of expertise. What rules were in Orgo that made it more difficult? I found the puzzle of like predicting what a product would be to be incredibly difficult, because there were rules, but they were a little bit vibe based, which made it very complicated. Like, I think organic chemists would probably assume that that's false, but my feeling when I was learning Orgo is that like there were rules, but then there were exceptions to those rules, which is fine because in biology there are exceptions all the time. But the difference is that those exceptions to those rules were testable, and then that made, you know, that was very hard for me to get a grasp on. I think, yeah, I want to be very careful here. That was my experience of organic chemistry. You know, your mileage may vary, and that might be why I was a bad Orgo student, is because I felt like the rules were vibe based, whereas a real organic chemist might be like, no, the rules are actually pretty hard and not a lot of wiggle room. And then that's probably why I did poorly. Yeah. Let's see. I just found this and watched the one about giant viruses. It's a great channel. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm a mechanic though, so I probably wouldn't know if you just started making stuff up. Some science still seems to be secret, either because it can be weaponized or I don't know, maybe various reasons. I mean, sometimes it's just not ethical. And a mechanic would have a lot in common with a biologist, believe you me, right? There's nothing, you know, I don't understand jack about a car, for example, but in terms of the way that a cell works, I think comparing it to a car, it would not be too inappropriate. What was my graduate field? I was a cell molecular biologist. Okay. No matter how carefully you explain something, someone will misunderstand. I mean, that's true, but I take great pride in minimizing that number. You know, I want to be very, very careful. And I think when you watch my content, I want you to feel like I have been very careful. I think that's part of the appeal of my channel, is that I actually don't like covering recent news. Like, I don't want, I just ignore headlines when it comes, I'll read a headline, I'll read a news article, but I won't ever think about making it into content unless there's something really compelling that I can tell from a story perspective, because I feel like when you are in the rat race to be the first to cover a hot new thing, it makes it, to me, like, if the time pressure makes it feel like I can't be as careful as I usually want to be, because, I take great pride that I don't get actually that much. I might get a thing wrong here or there, but that's not because I was sloppy with the material. That might be like a slip of the, it just slipped my mind. Like I thought I had assumed something was right, but then I usually catch those things as well. And so, even though it's true, you can only be so careful that some people are always going to misunderstand something. It is one of my greatest prides in my work that I do try to be, for one guy fact checking everything, as careful as humanly possible, right? Because a lot of the time goes into the research portion. I mean, editing takes longer, but like the amount of time that I have to be like, oh, I just have to delete this whole section because I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, I thought I did, but then when I reread the paper during the editing phase, I just had to jump the whole thing. Clockwork knows, right? I was like crashing out to him. That Trojan horse paper, I like didn't understand it. I looked at the data. And here's the other thing. Like, I want to be very clear. I don't just read the abstract when it comes to You Be the Scientist segments, right? Like, when I do general research for the channel, I'll read the paper uncritically because there's a lot to read. But when I do the You Be the Scientist segments, I like read the paper as if I were going to do it for Journal Club. Like, I was reading it professionally. Like, I go through all the data, not all the data. I go through the data that I care about, and I make sure to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to know how the knowledge is constructed. And I was crashing out to Clockwork being like, I don't understand how this data supports their conclusion, right? The antibody staining in that paper, and I like delayed the whole release by a whole day, like where I was just like rereading, like furiously rereading, being like, this is making sense to you. Like, I don't know why this staining is this way. I asked some fellow molecular biologists, I asked my virology friends from graduate school, like, please make this make sense to me. Like, I consulted a lot of people in order to get the logic correct. All that to say, I had a lot of fun doing it, but it does take me a while. Yeah. Was wondering if you saw recent papers on how different phage species communicate with each other through the Arbitrium system to inform/manipulate each other's lysogeny/lysis decisions. I mean, you could drop it in the Discord. I do remember seeing quorum sensing by phages, and I'm wondering if that's related to that, because I didn't really read those papers yet. I just have them saved up. There's so much more deeply interesting real stuff to talk about. Barely have time to even consider the speculative. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, I think I would die before I finished covering biology, right? Because for every month I take to do a video, there are 10 papers that come out that I land in the infinite paper backlog that like, it's just, there will never be interesting stuff to stop talking about, which is why I feel very good about the longevity of my channel. At least in terms of the content, right? Because there's this idea that like YouTubers have a finite lifespan before they start running out of things to say. But in terms of the field of biology, there's always going to be interesting stuff. By definition, as long as research continues to happen, there will be an infinite amount of content to cover. Yeah. How is research for you, by the way? How does it impact videos? In my field, they tend to end up being rabbit holes where one paper leads to another, and each paper takes a couple of days to digest. Like, it's I don't know. It's kind of complicated. I would say that, sometimes the paper is sparked by like the video is sparked by a paper. Sometimes the video is sparked by an idea. Like, for a little bit, I guess it is a little bit behind the scenes, but like Clockwork and I have been talking about how we would do a collaboration, and one of the ideas was this interesting split between Hep D and Hep B, both of which are pretty complex viruses, but since they do co-infect, just an arbitrary idea of like, hey, here are two viruses that work together. Why don't you cover one virus and I'll cover the other? But then I got really in my head about like, oh, there's not actually enough about just the Delta virus for a full video. And I'm afraid that people wouldn't really want to click on it because I already talked about Delta virus in my pathogens smaller than virus video. So I didn't want to sell this video as a Delta virus video for that reason, because I'm afraid that people who watch that video already would be like, well, why is he just rehashing old material? Like, why would I click on this video? So instead, I needed to find a different angle, and then that led to simultaneous infections as a whole, and then I dug down deep into that field, some of which I already knew about from graduate school. And if I ever get to this PowerPoint, I'll talk about that. But chat's asking really good questions, so I don't want to start the presentation part without, just doing the yap, because these are good questions. Yeah. Hello, Fly, first time catching your stream. Thank you for attending. Really love your videos as a fellow biology student. That's awesome. I love that. I'm so glad to be able to add a little bit of entertainment to your usual study. Why don't I have character art for mast cells, eosinophils, and basophils? That's because they haven't been that relevant in these videos so far. So Toxo has like a full-time job, right? And so I only want to ask Toxo for art if I know I'm going to be needing it. And mast cells, eosinophils, basophils, they just have not been that relevant in the videos so far. Monocytes have been more relevant than mast, eosinophil, or basophil. I don't just ask her to do work for no reason, right? I want to be very respectful of her time. Yeah. I find great, like really accurate. Could you play them on stream or stuff? I don't really know what you mean by that. Do you plan on talking about oncogenic viruses like EBV? Very much so. EBV is on the list of viruses to cover eventually, because I think the idea of a cancer-causing virus is something that not a lot of people really think about, which is important to, get all the preventative care that you can get access to. Can't believe I'm witnessing a stream. Thank you for all your work. Thank you for being a part of the story here. Yeah. To be fair, what on earth is a temicula? I don't even know what a temicula is. Oh, a tegument. Oh, tegument. Yeah. The crash out was like, I don't know what a tegument was. I assumed the tegument part of a virus was actually part of its envelope. And if you interpret the data thinking that the staining is reflective of the envelope, then the entire paper breaks down. But the tegument is actually between the viral capsid and the envelope. Like I thought viruses were just capsid and envelope, right? I'm not a real virologist. That's why I had to ask my virology friends. And my virology friend was like, the tegument's not really the envelope. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I had made an assumption that I did not bother to check, and that's where a lot of these cognitive errors come. It's where a lot of the re-edits happen, where I'm reading, I'm editing, and I hear myself say something, and it triggers my skepticism. But since I don't have a background in virology, I never caught the fact that the tegument is actually between the capsid and the envelope, and not just an envelope thing. What inspired you to encourage the viewers to think like scientists? It's so creative and very necessary. IMO. So a couple of different inspirations for the You Be the Scientist segment. I would say the primary one is that when I was in graduate school, I TA'd for an amazing cell and developmental professor. In terms of like, this professor was like the professor you wish you had, in terms of like, she would go to teaching workshops, she would share with other faculty what she learned. She was very invested not only in her own research, which was excellent. Cell and dev are so interesting and important, but she would also bring back these teaching tools to the other faculty, which I really appreciated, because a lot of faculty could give less than two, could give less than two about teaching. Because why? Well, their money comes primarily from the papers that they publish, right? The grants that they get. And so teaching seems like a waste of time. But this professor really deeply cared about teaching. And the You Be the Scientist segment is like directly lifted from her teaching style. I cannot claim to be the originator of You Be the Scientist. Yeah, she would include those in her slides, where she would be teaching undergraduates, and undergraduates are not usually afforded that level of intellectual autonomy, right? To be able to be put in a position where you are forced to think critically about a system. And, it clicked to me that like, oh, this is what, when people, I crashed out about this on Karis' stream. Everybody says we should be teaching critical thinking at schools. Nobody in these online debates, nobody has any idea how to do that. They all say we should be teaching kids to critically think. Nobody I've never seen an opinion online, a model by which critical thinking can be taught. And if you're going to say teach them formal logic, I would vehemently disagree. Formal logic works best for people who want to think in formal logic. Most people think on vibes. Most people are heuristic thinkers. They take correlation, they mash it with causation. It works most of the time in their lives, and they don't want to deconstruct reality, right? If you have a kind of nerdy person, I should say, teaching them formal logic would do wonders because they are willing to accept the tenets of formal logic in order to deconstruct reality. But most people don't think that way. However, if you pitch it where it is like a puzzle, not a math puzzle where it's abstract, modus tollens, modus ponens, ergo sum, proctor hoc, whatever, that doesn't resonate with normal people. You only take that class if you're a philosophy or a math nerd, right? For most people, you can be like, okay, here is a paper on a study that was done about whether or not coffee is good for you. Right? It seems like today coffee is good for you, tomorrow coffee is bad for you. It seems like there's a different paper every day coming out of nutrition that contradicts previous claims. Well, if you want people to engage critically with complex information, you could just have them read the paper and try to make a conclusion, and the very act of trying is critical thinking. The problem with that is there's no right answer, because at the end of the day, science is also a form of philosophy, right? And people get very mad when I say that. But what I mean by that is, because science is predictive and not prescriptive, right? Math is prescriptive. 2 + 2 is 4 in all universes where you set up the rules that 2 + 2 should equal 4. Whereas science is predictive. So we have, if a scientist were to look at 2 + 2 = 4, they would say we have a 99.99 repeating confidence in 2 + 2 = 4, right? That's science. And so when people simplify truth to being true or untrue, it gets very messy with how you would teach something like that. So if I were to teach the class, hey, let's read this nutrition study together, and then we'll have a conversation as a class. Well, how do I judge whether or not the person has reached the conclusion that I would reach? That'd be very difficult, right? There are people all over who would look at, to me, what would be garbage data and conclude something completely different. And then I would have to grade them on the accuracy of their reading, which isn't really a thing that you could do, because unlike math, which is prescriptive, 2 + 2 is always equal to 4 under the number systems that we have set up, which we because like math, you set up the rules, right? You from first axioms, from first principles. As long as you agree to play by a certain number of rules, there are things that are always true about those rules, logic. But science is observational a lot of the time, and it gets kind of hard to be able to grade that kind of thing in a formal classroom. However, on YouTube, I can do it for free. I don't have to care about what you personally come away with, as long as I do my best to guide you. But what I mean by that is, I can't reach into your brain and get the answer from you and grade you. That's not what I'm on YouTube to do. What I can do is give you the setup and then give you their answer, and then it's up to you to decide whether or not you failed, quote unquote failed. I don't really mean fail. I mean, how close did you get? That's on you. And so success is put into your hands. If you feel like you did a good job, you did a good job. If you feel like you were totally off the mark, you were totally off the mark. I don't have to grade you on that. But the very idea of you evaluating your own critical thinking is critical thinking. And it's a way that I can do it without having to be in a classroom. And I just think that's really awesome. So the You Be the Scientist idea came from a former professor that I TA'd for, but the actual way that I do it came from my personal advisor when I was a PhD student, because her ability to think was very clean, and I really appreciated that about her, because she taught me how to have a clean methodology. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, I think a lot of students just vibe check their way through college without really having a clear thought process, right? And this is true of me in undergraduate as well, where a lot of biology, you can kind of hard force a lot of your classes, right? You just memorize, spit out whatever you memorize, and you can get a pretty okay grade if you are good at that. But where graduate school separates the wheat from the chaff, I guess you could say, of thinking, right? Because if you're in graduate school, I can assure you, you're already pretty smart. But in terms of your growth from graduate school, it is about cleaning up your methodology, right? Not exactly being like, this is how you should think, but instead asking you to clearly lay out how you got from point A to point B, which is really, really important. I know a lot of people in the medical field who say that their students have been suffering from this lack of clarity, where they will, they'll write a note or something, but the note is not properly motivated. They don't have a very clean line from A to B, right? And I think that teaching people how to critically think by using the "you be the scientist" method enables people to claim ownership of their own thinking, instead of just vibe checking their way. Because like to get into medical school, you can vibe check your way through a lot. In terms of like, if you're good at memorization and spitting things out, then you'll probably be okay. But once you start being like, okay, the patient has a problem, I have to interview the patient, I have to get certain qualities out of the patient, and I have to piece together a diagnosis and a treatment plan, and all of those things cannot be vibe checked. They have to be properly motivated and clean, and a lot of students struggle at that stage, right? So helping people of all levels clean up their way of thinking, I think, is valuable, right? It's also fun, right? My primary motivation is, I think when I was in graduate school, it was really fun feeling like I was getting smarter. Not in terms of like raw IQ, right? Because I don't view myself as a very uniquely talented in terms of intelligence. In fact, a lot of my high ego is from understanding that I am of average intelligence, but I am good at other things. The fun of graduate school for me was like, as an average person with average intelligence, you can have the impression that you are a lot smarter than you really are once you dust the cobwebs off, once you start doing the maintenance in your critical thinking, right? Which sounds obnoxious, right? Because again, there's this aesthetic of critical thinking. We're like, well, I'm a critical thinker. My brain is so big. Rick and Morty. But that's not what it is, right? Critical thinking is not a badge that smart people get to wear. It is just a skill, much like artistry is a skill. And anybody can learn it, right? Like just how, an artist is able to cleanly go from an emotion that they are feeling to a physical representation of that emotion. There's a clean line of thought that goes into those decisions, even if it might not be similar to the way that a scientist would operate. That cleanliness, that through line, is just something that you can learn. And it's not necessarily a mark of intelligence, because I'm not very intelligent. It is just a sign that you bothered to practice, same practice as anybody would have practicing the guitar or practicing weightlifting. It can be learned. That's a long yap, but I've been thinking about the "You Be the Scientist" segments, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to yap there. my soliloquy. Yeah. Hello, I'm new here. Hello, sir. Welcome. Yeah, scrolling back through I will get to this PowerPoint presentation. Now I know how Cider A feels in terms of never being able to start the paper. I didn't know that different hepatitis viruses were unrelated. Yeah, neither did I until like deep into the video. Because when I was reading about the evolution of the Delta virus, because I figured, hey, that's kind of an interesting model. And I was like, how come nobody's thinking that hepatitis D is like a degenerate hep B? Like that's real. I didn't play that up. That was my like genuine, how come this is not a real hypothesis that people have? It's because, yeah, they're completely all from different viral families. It's pretty nuts. Hi-Fi, I've recently subscribed after finding your abiogenesis video. Welcome, Thunder Mage. I'm usually more into zoology, evolution, and paleontology, but your channel has given me a newfound love for microbiology. I love the little guys too, and I'm happy that you are here. What's the best sector of biology? I'm starting to get interested in the topics. That's a complicated question, because I think the most accessible entry point is biochemistry. So just go open up Clockwork's channel and just consume his whole catalog, right? That's your intro into the wonderfulness that is biology. I think that's where you start. And then from there, like my personal like holy grail of like topics I want to cover is development. How do you get from sperm and egg to a whole organism? The dance of molecules but like to me that's like final boss stuff, because you need to have solid foundations in biochemistry and in cell biology and in genetics. So you have to know all of biology before you can even touch the problem of sperm egg equals fetus, right? Like you have to have all the pieces assembled. But the entry point, I think, is biochemistry. It was my entry point too. The first subject where I thought, hey, maybe I could be like a researcher one day. That was actually when I was in a biochemistry seminar, I guess. It was a talk, like a talk about kinesin, the walking molecule. That is where I started to be like, maybe this could be for me. So that's where I would start. Oncogenic viruses, he just did a whole thing on HBV. I mean, I didn't, right? You did, right? You are going to do the HBV video. I merely glossed over it, and I also took out the part where it was oncogenic because I was like, oh, like I don't want to get like tackled down into a side quest talking about oncolytic viruses. When also, like, I don't know about you, Clockwork, but I couldn't find any mechanism for or at least because I was looking more on the hepatitis D side. I didn't really find a mechanism for it because it's kind of mysterious, but I think you might be more suited to tackle that part anyway. EBV, however, I think, if I remember correctly, the mechanism is more well understood. I finally get to watch my Ushi streaming. Welcome, Rizal. Welcome. Phages do quorum sensing for their own population to sense host abundance. That's awesome. I love that. If I talk about HPV, would you consider talking about transmissible cancers as well, aka canine transmissible venereal tumor? I thought about it. I'm less excited to do a topic like that because I think that leans. I don't know. I would think about it. I know there's a lot of interest for it, and so there's an incentive for me to cover it. But the thing that you have to know about me as a creator is that I'm very stubborn. There was only one video on my channel that I did for an audience in terms of like trying to game what people wanted out of me, and that was the probiotic video I did, because I was like, people want to hear about probiotics, right? And then that didn't go very well. I have to have like an intrinsic. If I don't love the topic, I'm not convinced I can make you love the topic. And transmissible cancers, there might be something there, but I don't intrinsically love them right now. So I'll say, unlike sci-fi, which I'm like pretty sure I'm not going to do, the transmissible cancer stuff is a maybe, but not anytime soon, I think. Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much. I really want to get to everybody, and maybe I'll do quick before I'll get to the short slides that I have, and then I'll continue yapping because I'm having a good time. But I want to get to everybody first. Just say I'm just reading chat very quickly. Clean way of thinking. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that after the PowerPoint, because I think being clean in your thinking is very important, and I have a lot of thoughts about what that actually means. It's a good point. I've graded papers where the proofs are correct, but the way they went about it just raises so many questions. Exactly, like the inefficiencies in thought can be cleaned up with practice, and it's not. And I think it's an underappreciated element of teaching and learning is that. Even in the teaching workshops that I've been a part of, there haven't been a lot of emphasis on the cleanliness of student thought, the clarity, right? It's about, and I'll talk about that a lot more, I think, after the PowerPoint presentation. Another question, how do I decide on character design? I said influenza was cute, Hep D looks very mature and naughty. What's your design philosophy / approach? It's mostly Toxo, my wife, who does the art. I will usually guide some elements of it. Most of the art was just like, I didn't start directing the art direction for her until very, 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 very recently. So the overwhelming majority of the good looking drawings was done by her completely from her mind. But I think her general design philosophy is just cute is justice. I remember when she drew the influenza, I was like, this is so cute and I don't know how to feel about it. Could you maybe make it less cute? But then I was like, but then she won me over. I'm like, well, it's not a bad thing that these horrible things are remade into being cute. It's not the worst. because the script is very serious, right? The script is not treating the diseases as light. So even though influenza is one of the biggest killers of people today, I think a core aspect of making my content approachable is actually leaning away from diseases being scary. Yeah. Like the direction that I mean is that, like, for this past video, that's the one where I actually did have some input into how I wanted things to look. The HIV, you know, the Pac-Man mouth. If you know anything about HIV, the Pac-Man mouth is actually an allusion to HIV's capsid. It has like this weird this weird trapezoid mouth thing. Like the DNA is stored. HIV is an RNA virus, right? Reverse transcriptase, right? Famously, question mark. But its genome is in a capsid that looks a lot like a trapezoid. And then thinking about how could we incorporate that into a cute design? Well, we can make that trapezoid capsid appear to be like the mouth, which is something that I think Toby Fox does a lot in his Undertale Deltarune designs, as well as like cute design that has double meaning. And I think those have been a lot of fun to think about. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's go quickly through this extra bit, and I promise we will go back to science yapping because I'm having a great time. But I do want to tell you about one story that I could not include in this video. Okay, so we're an hour into yapping. We're an hour into yapping, and now I'm going. I really do feel like cider. We're an hour into yapping, and we finally get to this presentation. So let's just go through this pretty quickly. Okay, so there's this whole segment of this video that I had to take out for time about superinfection exclusion, which I was really bummed by because I thought that this was a fun story, but I could not justify the tempo because, you know, I think if you're a fellow content creator, you might know what I'm talking about, tempo. But if you don't, you might be like, oh, well, you should put it in the video anyway. What's the harm? I'm like, I don't know. Retention is pretty important. And I feel like even though I love this story, it just didn't work in the context of the stories that were surrounding it. So I'm going to tell it here. So just as a reminder, if you didn't watch my last video, I'm going to remind you of what a superinfection is. So a superinfection occurs when one virus clearly establishes an infection before the other, right? So this is in contrast with co-infection, where two viruses are introduced at roughly the same time. So on the left here, we have a superinfection where Hep D is infecting after Hep B is already established, whereas co-infection is when they both come in at the same time. So superinfection usually refers to infection at the cellular level. This is opposed to an organismal level, right? So when people say superinfection, they usually mean a cell. Not always, but usually. And when we're dealing with superinfection, we're usually thinking about individual cells, and this does matter, you know? So superinfection exclusion is a term that describes an interesting form of negative viral interference, where one infecting virus is going to completely block out similar viruses to themselves. So phages, which we've been talking about in chat, are viruses that specifically infect bacteria, and these guys are the goats of superinfection exclusion, right? I actually, when I was in graduate school, I learned about superinfection exclusion through the lens of phage versus bacteria wars, right? So despite having learned a lot about the consequences of superinfection exclusion, like I just remember a whole like 2 weeks dedicated to phages and bacteria in graduate school. I don't actually remember how these phages do this. I know that they do. I know that they block other phages, but I don't know how they do it. I'm not saying I was never taught this, right? Maybe they taught it and I just didn't retain it, but I just don't remember it at all. So superinfection exclusion was an important cornerstone in the classic days of molecular biology, right? A lot about how we understand how DNA just works, how bacteria work. That relied very heavily upon this property of phages called superinfection exclusion. And I just don't remember how this happens. So it was fun getting to be reacquainted with this mechanism that I'm going to explain to you right now. So I love this review. which is open access. You can read it online. Phage Against the Machine is a very funny title. The science of superinfection exclusion, SIE standing for superinfection exclusion. Just, people give some of these journals a lot of crud for being low quality, but, and what I mean by that is like MDPI gets a really bad rep. But if you want an open access review, you can go to MDPI and get an okay understanding of the field, right? There's nothing wrong with reading a review from MDPI. And I love that these guys had the freedom, because this title does not fly in Nature. This title does not fly in Cell. In MDPI, they can get away with a title like this, and I think that's fun, and I think that's interesting, right? So, in order to understand superinfection exclusion, we have to first talk a little bit about phages and, a little bit about the basic biology of phage, right? So when a phage infects a bacteria, there are two primary ways that this infection can happen. They can go through a lytic phase, lytic, L-Y, lytic, from lysis, from breaking open the cell. So this is what you probably learned in school at some point. A phage enters a bacteria, makes copies of itself, and then blows the cell apart and releases those copies into the environment. However, something that I wasn't as aware of until graduate school was that there's another life cycle that phages can go through called the lysogenic phase. So this happens when the phage genome gets integrated into the bacteria and lives a relatively stable, peaceful life. Then, due to an environmental trigger, they can change into a lytic phase. There's usually a repressor protein coded for by the phage that stops this transition from happening. But if there's an environmental pressure to, replicate very quickly and bust out, that repressor protein can be disabled, and then that will transition from lysogenic to the lytic phase, right? So that's basic background. This will come into handy when we talk about superinfection exclusion. So when you have a lysogenic infection, this peaceful coexistence, lysogeny actually prevents superinfection from happening. And just for a vocabulary word, when you have an integrated phage, they're called prophage. Pro, like, before, suffix for prefix for before. So these prophages that live in the bacteria as a genome, not as like the little robot that phages look like, they are called prophages, right? And this stops other infections from happening, and I never really understood why. But before we get into how this happens, we first have to answer an evolutionary quandary, right? So let's take a bit of time to think about why this happens. So number one, superinfection exclusion usually happens between viruses of the same or similar family. Now remember, in that superinfection video, I had talked about rhinovirus completely blocking out influenza, potentially by mistake or by accident. But if you think about it, rhinovirus might want to stop influenza from coming in. They might have an incentive to stop it, because otherwise influenza would be competing for the same polymerases, for the same ribosomes, et cetera, et cetera. So you could argue that maybe the high interferon response is in some ways a net benefit for rhinovirus, because you can stop competition. But superinfection exclusion usually happens between viruses of the same or similar family, so not rhinovirus versus influenza, but of two viruses that belong to the same species or family. We've seen many instances of individual organisms and cells who give their life for others altruistically, right? So there are colony-forming bugs like ants and bees who famously, don't care about their own individual life, but rather give their life for the increased fitness of their queen. And this is true for eukaryotes as well, but on a smaller stage, right? The neutrophil, which I have repeatedly used as an example, will actually eject its DNA and then die, because its ejected DNA can be used as a toxic net to kill pathogens, right? So the neutrophil, even though it has its own DNA, acts selflessly because of its programming, because it is incentivized to make sure that the sperm and egg live long enough to get passed into the next generation. So there's this kind of, who do you save, one brother or six cousins? There's a kind of evolutionary pressure, this evolutionary math that plays out at this level. So here's a You Be the Scientist moment. Why would a virus seek to sabotage its own kind by locking out other viruses from infecting the same cell? So go ahead and leave your hypotheses in chat, right? This is a pseudo You Be the Scientist, right? This is not You Be the Scientist in the way of like designing an experiment, but in terms of hypothesizing. It's another tool that I think people should have, is to be able to generate a hypothesis without relying on ChatGPT, because there was a recent paper that came out that was like, oh, college students are not using ChatGPT as often as you think when it comes to writing their essays, but they still use it to brainstorm. I'm like, I think that's still kind of bad. So let's use our brainstorming muscles and think about this problem. Why are there viruses that sabotage their own family members when there are so many instances of life that would give themselves up to save 8 cousins? Phages will trick other species to say lysogenic while their own strain does lysis by manipulating their quorum sensing. That's awesome. I love that. The evolutionary war that happens between phages and bacteria, it's just, there's so much going on. Like, they are evolution tuned up to 11. It's awesome. Marlon says because they already code for mechanisms to manipulate a protein other viruses use, and I'm not sure what ways a viral particle can help other particles. That's an interesting idea. How fascinating. It's amazing learning more about how viruses function. Isn't it amazing? It's so cool. The fact that they're so simple in terms of their coding capacity, but still are doing so much is, I think, very, very elegant. So TH says, so Theta says, so the other viruses can go to a different bacteria. Oh, that's an interesting hypothesis. Interesting. Because they don't like each other. Yeah. I get, if you wanna personify it a bit, I think that's accurate. If a superinfection increases the mortality rate, that would impede the ability for viruses to spread. That's also interesting. I'd have to think about that one, because there might be some truth to that, but it's playing with some complex ideas in my head that are not easy to communicate. Adna, a virus would want itself to spread and not let its brothers/cousins take up the same resources of the cell it's attacking, making it less likely to spread if all the viruses. It's a very similar hypothesis to Theta, what Theta had. In the same way that not all animals are altruistic, there are instances where animals compete, even close relatives. That is also true. You could definitely make that comparison. Does it have to do with evolutionary pressure and or different viruses competing for limited biomass? Potentially. You could think of it as competitive. There are other explanations as well, which I think are interesting. But I think that is definitely fair, right? Like, you could be so selfish that you would stab your own brother in the back. Is possible. It reminds me of different ways predators behave in situations with limited food supplies, though I'm not sure how accurate that is to their functioning in reality, but it is reminiscent. I think that previous experience and context is also useful, right? It's interesting. Evolution is a principle that is essentially the same no matter what you're talking about. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are direct parallels. Lysogeny is an informed biological decision. Also seems directly antithetical for your own selection to allow another virus to do lysis and go crazy while you're quiet. Coordination does matter, yeah. All right. So interesting hypotheses. Let's see what the research that I have encountered says. Because I'm not going to say that I'm not going to say that, if your answer isn't in this next slide that you're wrong. It's just, these are the hypotheses that I have found. So, as commenters have said, survival of the fittest is, that is evolution. Darwin didn't say it, but Darwin liked the phrase so much that Darwin eventually did adapt survival of the fittest. But when Darwin is saying survival of the fittest, what Darwin is meaning to say is that organisms that best fit their context, their environment, the other organisms that they live with, competition for resources, the organisms that are best suited for the challenge of existing are obviously going to be the ones that end up surviving, not the survival of the looks maxed gigachad, right? So in terms of the idea of the most selfish, the most alpha, that's evolutionary success. It's not always true because we all live in a specific context. So what works for one set of DNA might not work for others, and I will reduce organisms down to one, you are a set of DNA, I am a set of DNA. In terms of evolution, that is kind of the way that evolution is thought of, what is being selected on. The DNA is what is being selected on, because the DNA is at the, it is the storage mechanism by which biology is expressed. So why would a phage turn to stab its brother? And it's because superinfection exclusion might really not be that selfish. So as a couple of commenters have already pointed out, this prevents redundant infection, right? You don't actually want too many of these phages coming into the same bacteria, because then those bacteria can act as sponges. But also, interestingly enough, and I don't remember if I have slides on this, something that earlier, I think somebody who probably does understand phage quite well, judging by their comments in the chat, lysogeny is like a one and done deal, right? If a second virus enters during the lysogenic phase, it could ruin everybody's day by causing the bacteria to die, which would not be good for anybody, So peace can be achieved if one phage is in the lysogenic phase. If you get another phage entering, you could ruin it. So protecting the peace is also an incentive for the infecting phage. And it also keeps fitness high by selecting for successful phages. So if you are the one to infect the bacteria, you have succeeded. And by rewarding that success, you are keeping the overall fitness of the viral population very high. Whereas if you are the second one in, you might be permitting the phages that are less good at, taking longer to infect. If you allow them to survive, then you would be overall decreasing the overall fitness. And before I continue, there's some edgy teenager out there that is going to make this their entire personality. My audience should know better, so don't think too hard about that. Don't be an edgy teenager. This is just how things work at the phage level, right? And I will say no more than that. Okay, so the specific example that I think would be interesting to look at is between Pseudomonas aeruginosa and the filamentous phage PF. So Pseudomonas is on the left here, one very important pathogen for human health. Fantastic biofilm maker, very, very interesting bacteria on its own, probably will get its own video at some point. And then its corresponding phage, the phage PF. So how does this battle happen? Like, how does superinfection exclusion actually happen? In this particular case, this particular phage has an interesting game plan. So PF will insert into bacteria via the T4P receptor. It integrates into host DNA, so it enters a lysogenic phase, and then it removes the T4P receptor. It pulls the receptor out, and essentially what it does is it pulls the ladder out from behind them, right? So if you're climbing like a mountain and there are people climbing behind you, PF basically pulls the squid game and then pulls the ladder up, preventing other phage from getting in. This will enable the phage to stay in the bacteria forever, because T4P superinfection can actually kill the bacteria, which would be pretty bad. There's an interesting question in chat. Is there a way to scientifically prove which of the evolutionary quote-unquote motivations happens? There is, depending on how you want to put it, ways to find evidence that are consistent with your hypothesis. For example, you could screw with this exclusion mechanism and then measure overall fitness, right? There are ways to test this hypothesis. I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying proof because that's very black and white, like very heavy of a term. But there are experiments that you can do to argue for one interpretation or over the other, for sure. So why do bacteria that have a T4P receptor, that is what phages use to infect? Like, this is an interesting question as well, right? Like, why, if a bacteria is expressing a weak point, right, this T4P receptor that phages use and take advantage of to enter the bacteria, why make it to begin with? And this is a question that I've actually gotten in my other videos about the immune system. Like, why would the bacteria make a pili, a molecule that the immune system learned to attack? Well, it's because whatever protein these phages are taking advantage of is important enough for the bacteria to keep, that despite it being a weak point for the bacteria, despite it being an entry point for phages, is probably doing something pretty important. And in this case, this T4P receptor that the phages are taking advantage of are important for a type of motility called bacterial twitching motility. And this is crazy. I wish I could show you a picture because this is a closed access paper, copyright, blah, blah, blah. But like bacteria, if you put them on a surface, they can actually walk like people. Like this picture that I drew is not that inaccurate. Which is crazy, right? It's like a bacteria growing little feet, and it can run across like a glass dish, right? That's pretty insane. And so, when you have bacteria who rely not on swimming in a liquid media, but maybe need to travel over a surface, they will use this pili to physically walk across these surfaces. So there's a pretty important function if you are the type of bacteria who lives on surfaces. It's pretty nuts. Okay. So superinfection exclusion is not exclusive to phage, however, right? Influenza also does this by snipping off the receptor that it uses to infect cells. So this is kind of surprising to me because in my influenza video that is also a collab with Clockwork, I had told you that influenza kind of has cut its teeth doing viral mating, right? That's why we have a flu season every year. It's because these viruses, when you have different strains infecting the same person, their RNAs can get mixed and matched, and then you have a new influenza you have to deal with, and it's a new one every year because there are a lot of influenzas like rolling around. However, there's a point in the influenza viral life cycle where this is actually not good for fitness. Like there's a regulated way that this needs to happen, right? So when the infection first starts off, influenza is like, all right, we're here to party, let's mix and match. But after a while inside the cell, influenza draws the line and is like, hey, we can't be doing this anymore. We can't be, frolicking our genome in this way. And this happens when the protein that is required to snip the receptor off is actually coded. So even though influenza does do viral mixing, there's a penalty for allowing it to go uncontrolled. So it'll actually prevent superinfection at some point by snipping off the receptor that it used to get in, which is very, very interesting. That's it. So, yep, that's the story I wanted to tell. Let's head back into the pond. Where am I? There I am. Let's get back into the warm little pond. Let's get a little bigger. So that's the presentation on superinfection. And now we can get back to general science yapping. Let me go ahead and check back in with chat. This hikey gave me flashbacks to 2020 online uni Zoom classes. Yeah. I was actually a Zoom believer, believe it or not, because I was a graduate student when COVID happened. And I spent a good chunk of my teaching hours coming up with online material that would actually engage the students because, it sucks. I feel really bad for the Zoom 2020 class. But I was also very optimistic that online learning could work because medical students do it all the time. Not all medical students thrive under those conditions. One size does not fit all. But what I will say is that it can work. And I was really focused on trying to make online content for my university at the time to best adapt to the very challenging situation that we found ourselves in. It's also in terms of the topic, not all viruses care quite as much about superinfection exclusion, right? It is context dependent. So that's why I like virology so much. Is every virus is its own special little story. No two viruses are the same. Which reminds me of a very funny comment I got on Billy on my on one of my virus videos, where that comment was like, this isn't anything special. This virus doesn't do anything special. All viruses usurp the immune system. Every virus has some way to attack the immune system. It's really not that special. This guy's videos really aren't anything interesting or unique. And I'm like, bro, what kind of comment is that? The fact that every virus has a different way to attack the immune system isn't inherently interesting to you. But what kind of person leaves a comment like that? And that's when you realize that YouTube, when you open up and you make content for the internet, you get all sorts of different people with different perspectives. And the fact that somebody would leave a comment being like, all viruses attack the immune system, ergo, these viruses are not interesting, to me is it's just, it's unfathomable. Like, people, the spectrum of humanity is truly wide. Truly wide. I have a question about phages. What if virus 1 has phage against virus 2 and vice versa? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. What if a phage and a phage that destroy each other collide? It's kind of interesting. I don't actually know too much about bacteriophage to that level of detail beyond like broad concepts, but you know, I'm sure I'll encounter something like that in the phage wars research. If T4P is used for walking, how do the phages use that to attack the bacteria? If that was some receptor to take something into the bacteria, it would make sense. So it is a receptor. I don't actually know how it is used in the motility because the paper's closed access and I couldn't get a hold of it. But it is important to generate the machinery needed to do the walking. So it still lies on the bacterial surface. It's just, it's the receptor that the phage sneak a ride to get into. Oh, thank you so much for the super chat, R1P Exalted Auto. Hey man, found your channel, love your videos. Thank you so much. Quick question, which disease do you think is the most annoying for the immune system? Annoying is an interesting term because like the default answer is like HIV, right? HIV will eat your immune system alive, but you use the term annoying. So I would say my gut reaction says measles. Because of measles is and measles is definitely going to get its own video. Measles will erase your immune memory, and I think that's fantastically annoying. Like, not fantastic as a good way, but it is a unique aspect about measles and why it is so dangerous. Because you can live a whole life, you know, compiling data about phages, not phages, about bacteria, about other viruses. You can have a very strong immune memory, and when measles hits your system, it's like they deleted that memory without saving a backup, right? I would say that for the immune system, that's probably annoying AF to have worked your entire life, you know, your Google Drive with all of your data, to just have that deal. Or like, I don't know, I think the annoyance is like what happened when I was younger and my little cousin was over and I was playing Final Fantasy X. And my little cousin, much younger than I was, deleted my save file, and I lost it. I was very, very mad. And I would assume the immune system is similarly mad at measles. Just incredibly, incredibly annoying to lose all of your data. I was wanting to study more science-related majors, but then I remember I was an absolute menace as a child and would have been terrorizing anything I studied. God forbid I had become an ecologist. I'm sure if you know, children are so volatile, but then when you really settle into certain aspects of your more realized being as an older person, I think it is a lot more chill. I think a lot more chill. The man lacks whimsy. Exactly. Like, what do you say to a person who lacks whimsy? Or just go watch a lecture? Like, you saw the thumbnail of a cartoon. Why would you assume why would you assume that you would not be getting whimsy? I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy to then share that opinion. Yeah, that's nuts. I had to get tested to make sure I didn't get measles. And learning about immune amnesia, I was not pleased to hear that. Yeah, exactly. Like, the immune amnesia thing is very unsettling and is what makes measles such a... But the thing with all these scary diseases is that there are vaccines. So as long as you are not immunocompromised, you should be okay. I do feel quite badly for my kin who are immunocompromised and who cannot actually take a vaccine. They, you know, yeah, good luck, and I wish you well. I guess my contribution is to be an unapologetic advocate for vaccination and to bring awareness to these diseases, despite what some comments on my videos want me to do. Thanks for the answer. I did not know that. Yeah. It's a little bit of a spoiler though, because I really do want to do a measles video at some point. Uh, I want please do a lipid world hypothesis and more videos on evolution. I probably won't, because I'm not. Okay. So the thing you have to know about YouTubers is that the best way that a lot of YouTubers who want to do this long term is to not get stuck doing something you don't want to do. And as much as I loved doing the abiogenesis video, I don't want to be the abiogenesis guy. So that's it, you know? A journal club on Liquid World, perfectly happy to do. But mainline releases, I want to be the cell and molecular biology guy and not the proving creationists wrong, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do that anymore. I wonder if we can harness measles' ability to treat autoimmune conditions and allergens. I think that's not a bad idea. I think it's a pretty interesting idea. I don't know whether or not. I think using measles as inspiration might be something to look at, but I'm not an allergist, so I'm not entirely sure. Because autoantibodies, yeah, they're bad, and potentially, if you could selectively remove a population of autoimmune B cells, that could be something very interesting to consider. But I think what is more important, not saying you're wrong, Marlon, like there could be something that we could learn from measles, but I think like if we're talking about autoimmune treatment, I think a way to specifically target specific populations of B cells is like the bottleneck here. And measles just kind of eliminates all of the memories. As far as I know, I didn't do my deep dive yet, but that's how I understand measles to work right now. Yeah. Yeah. What is my favorite science channel? Well, yeah, my favorite would be mine, as you've correctly pointed out. I did a video, I did a live stream about analyzing my greatest rivals in terms of like the science communication world, and you can watch my deep insight into Tirzu and Octopus Lady and Clockwork and Kirkazad. No, I didn't do Kirkazad yet. I did Veritasium and I did Vsauce. And I love Vsauce and Veritasium so much that I wrote my undergraduate thesis in rhetoric on how they communicate information, because I found that what they were doing was very revolutionary in terms of pushing the boundaries on how content can be educational and not in like a boilerplate explainer video, because I think explainer videos for me are no longer that interesting. For me as a creator, right? I don't want any of my videos to be reductive in just telling you what the science is. I want there always to be an element of challenging you to think about how data form reality. I didn't start that way, right? Like my earlier videos were much more in line with explainers or like story time, like science story times, I think is what somebody called it. But now I think I've gotten to a groove where like I found my entry into the SciComm world, my unique thing. So, like historically, what was most important for me, Vsauce and Veritasium were extremely important for my own philosophy on teaching, philosophy on content. My current favorite communication channel is this it's actually none of the ones that I had mentioned, although I do love them all very dearly. But if I were to say like the content that I am like very, very the most excited to see, there's a channel called The Poopy Show. And I think that The Poopy Show is awesome. Now, the Poopy Show is not in the same genre as me or Clockwork or Octopus Lady, not by a long shot. But if you consider them to also be a edutainment channel, I just think they're very funny and very charming, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm not going to answer who my second favorite channel is. I would say the most entertaining channel to me right now is The Poopy Show. And then historically, the most important for my development, it's been Veritasium and Vsauce. Yeah. I think more lecturers and professors should be like you. Wouldn't it be amazing if instead of just being slides, a small funny animated videos waiting for you on the e-learning module sites? Okay, here's my rant about me as a teacher, right? You have only seen me as a communicator. Teachers have a very different job and cannot always be the fun, entertaining guy. In order for true learning to happen, there must be friction. And on YouTube, the friction can be you be the scientist, right? I'm asking you in a Dora the Explorer kind of way to play with the ideas. You don't have to, it's optional. But a teacher has an incentive. They are trying to get your grade up as high as possible so that you are most prepared as possible so that you can leave a generous alumni donation or make the university look good, right? There's a different set of incentives. And the job of a teacher is to actually make sure that you know the material. And that can be very unfun. The reason why I get to be the fun little animated guy that I am is that I'm not giving you a quiz, and I'm not your career does not hinge on me explaining information to you, right? Like I say this because I don't want to be like, let it get to my head, right? Like I have a lot of comments that are just like, I wish you were the teacher that I wish you had been teaching me. I'm like, you don't know that, right? Because when I'm in teacher mode, my job is different. My job is to make sure that you actually know the material, and I have to be very unfun to do that, right? Like making sure like giving you a bad grade is a part of learning, and you might not like me if I give you a bad grade. What is the most lethal yet understudied disease? There's an argument for Hep B, which Clockwork is doing, right? In terms of deaths per year, Hep B isn't as sexy of a disease to talk about, right? How many of you have seriously thought about Hep B before watching my video on Delta virus, right? Probably not a lot of people. Whereas HIV has had incredible public awareness. Malaria has incredible public awareness. Tuberculosis has incredible public awareness. I don't know if Hep B is understudied, but it's definitely underappreciated by the public. What is that? What is that one thing that doesn't make any sense but still exists? And suggest some book on biology. I don't read biology books. I don't read pop sci. And the reason why is I don't want I would rather just read the papers. So I don't actually read books. Although I have heard good things about Kierkegaard's book on immunity. So if you want something like that, then probably that. I think that animation is a very different skill set than science itself. You can learn both, but they both require a lot of time investment. I would agree with that. So, but before I did the PowerPoint presentation, we had talked a little bit about clarity of thought, and I'm wondering if you want to chat about clarity of thought, while chat is doing other things. So, like, I want to start by gathering your thoughts on what you think when I say clarity of thought, right? If you have an understanding of what I mean or an awareness, like, would you describe yourself as a very clear thinker? While I go and address some chat questions. What do I think the plan is after antibiotics stop working? There's no way that antibiotics stop working, I think, because there are dedicated scientists finding new antibiotics. I think the concern that you might be addressing is whether or not we can discover and manufacture new antibiotics faster than resistance can occur. And I think there's a lot of potential in attenuation or improvement in the immune system, right? Like, the immune system is pretty good at its job as long as it gets taught how to deal with certain threats, right? And I think training the immune system is going to be the way for it, right? Like, through vaccination is one strategy, but I wouldn't be surprised if there are better strategies coming out in the future after the age of antibiotics, which, again, I don't personally believe that there will be an end to the age of antibiotics, because as long as scientists keep on innovating, bacteria will have to keep up, right? And if they adapt to a new antibiotic, there's a chance that they lose resistance to an old antibiotic, right? Like, this is evolution in work. And, modern antibiotics have only been around for so long. So the future is very uncertain with regards to the prospect of the end of antibiotics as like an idea. I would say I wouldn't doom about it personally, from the knowledge that I have, I'll say. I heard phage therapy can be an option. I think phage therapy is cool. I think there are a lot of challenges with regards to phage therapy, namely making sure that the phage get to the right place at the right time, and also, I think a lot of phage therapy is going to be biased towards areas of the body where microbes are also. So the reason why I say that it's like challenging is I from what I understand about phage therapy, it's not going to be useful for every case of bacterial infection because there's going to be a limit to circulation of phages within the body. And I think a pharmacist is going to have, a pharmacologist is going to be a lot more educated in drug design in this manner. But if you think about it, like, how are you going to get phage, for example, into the meninges, right, where you could have bacterial meningitis, right, like access, whereas like an antibiotic can be very smaller than a phage, can be permeable to all sorts of membranes like the blood-brain barrier, and the body is wired in such a way where those barriers, I think, are going to be pretty tricky. Not impossible, of course, but I would not pin all of my hopes on phage therapy. I have a reasonable, diversified portfolio of biotech solutions, I would say. Clarity of thought, I think, makes me think a lot about bias. There are a lot of blind spots depending on education gained and cross-specialty review, so it's important. I would agree with that. To me, clarity of thought means that you have an understanding of what motivates the solution of a certain problem. So, like, from the stories that I have heard, like, there are medical students, I mean, they're students, right? They're learning, but like there's the tension in their learning and the frustration that comes from learning how to deal with a patient and how to correctly diagnose and develop a treatment plan is moving from test mode, where it's like, okay, this bag of symptoms is this, into something actionable. Like, what do I need to do to actually A, get the information I need, and B, act upon that information? And clarity of thought, to me, means that you can draft you can describe clearly what you are trying to accomplish and how you are going to accomplish it and why you are going to attack the problem in the way that you are. And what concerns me is that with the advent of ChatGPT, explaining everything, it's great at explaining stuff in a very simple manner, but if you never have to explain things to yourself, how are you going to explain something to another human being? Like, to me, the clarity of thought that I'm referring to is in communication of a thought process. It is specifically communication and not the end product, because there are plenty of smart students who give you the right answer, but then have no idea how they got there. And that's because they vibe check their way through school, right? They have an intuition. They probably learned the material quite well to have intuition, right? I'm not saying that their thinking is flawed. I'm saying their thinking is very muddy, unclear, uncertain, opaque. And if I can't see your train of thought, you are not going to be very convincing, because even if you're a brilliant scientist, if you can't explain your science, nobody will believe you, because science is sociological in a certain essence, right? It doesn't matter if you're right. What matters is that you can convince people that you are right. Then they support you. Then you start changing the field. Then, you can have your revolution. But if you just have the correct answer and then nobody believes you, you will have amounted to nothing, right? Your impact will have been minimal. So by clarity of thought, I mean, you need to walk through everything. And what do I mean by that? You have several distinct skills. One skill is identifying the problem. Some students can't even identify the problem, right? They don't know what it is that they are trying to accomplish. Drafting a plan and then being able to explain why you chose every single step of those plans. And I only really learned to do that in graduate school. So the You Be the Scientist segment is a little bit trying to have people who want to engage with that segment a little bit of practice with drafting at least a part of that thought process, right? Because in the You Be the Scientist segments, I have the problem for you, prove this, and then I have the background, and then I'm relying on you to draft the in-between. But I have no way to challenge you further, right? That's why stream is better, because we can have a back and forth. I can challenge your thought process, And you can iterate and improve and see where your thought process was lacking. The videos do an okay job at it, but because I cannot get the feedback, I cannot inhibit the shoes of a teacher. I can only inhibit in occupy the shoes of a communicator, right? It's different when we're on stream, right? Yeah. To me, that seems less like clarity of thought and more focused on communication. I think for me, it is more about the affects your ability to understand the whole picture. I think, like, to me, the term clarity is, and I'm not saying you're wrong because words mean different things to different people, but to me, clarity is more evocative of communication because you can arrive at the right solution often, but not understand how you got there. And to me, understanding how you got there is like the skill that I need students to get. And if they don't get that, then I will have failed. And that will be devastating, right? If that's the case, I'm cooked in terms of clarity of thought. But it's not too late to start thinking about how you're thinking, right? If that's what you're referring to, right? I just, the generation that is being lost to ChatGPT, I feel so afraid for them because it is so easy to just outsource your thinking to ChatGPT. And it feels like you're not even doing that because ChatGPT gives you the answer and then you write the answer down. You might even understand the answer, but if you don't force yourself to go through the friction of battling with information you do not understand, it will weaken your resolve. And I think that's bad. I do think ChatGPT damages less the ability to think and more the dedication to learn. I think over time, the loss of desire to study damages clarity of thought, but the start is more drive based. I think it's multifactorial. I think you're right in the sense where the ability to force yourself to learn is, I think, slowly getting cooked. And I think one of the most surprising instances of this happening to me when I was still teaching is this was particularly devastating because I was like, this is a thing that I would never have thought to do. I was teaching in my class, and a student called me over to ask me how to put error bars on a graph, and it kind of stun locked me. I could not get over that. Why? There might be some of you who are from a different generation who might think that's a completely reasonable question to ask. The student didn't know how to do it. The teacher's job is to teach, so why is it surprising that a student would ask me how to put error bars on a graph? And it's like, when I was the age, when I was a student, I would be so embarrassed to ask a teacher at a university class how to put error bars on a graph. It would never occur to me that I could do that because I didn't want to out myself as being a little dumb. I was like, do you have no shame? And like, I don't want to shame people into asking questions, right? But there is a such thing as stupid questions, right? Let's get the full cards on the table. There are stupid questions, and one question that is stupid is, how do I put error bars on a graph in Excel? Because you can just Google that, right? Like, to me, that was very distressing because I'm like, maybe this is a generational divide because it kept on happening. Like these very basic, a generation raised on like, there are no stupid questions. I'm like, oh, okay, wait. We've overcorrected. And instead of asking me a question about biology, you have asked me how to operate the very basic software that I'm surprised you didn't learn how to use in high school. Like there's something very distressing about this moment. And I taught at a very good university as well, It's very, very surprising. Very, very surprising. Exercising via lifting weights yourself versus exercising via lifting weights with construction equipment. Yeah. Still unlocked. Yeah. I was really surprised. It was so consistent too. Like if you're a student, I don't want you to feel bad if you don't understand something. I do want you to feel bad if you don't understand something and then you don't make a basic attempt to try to figure it out for yourself. That's all I'm asking, is a basic attempt to look up the information yourself. And then, so my ideal student would be something that acts like this. Like, I don't understand something. I'm going to take a stab at reviewing the notes first. Maybe I'll try Googling it. I ask you a question. I present to you what I have done so far. So, for example, if a student didn't understand, I don't know, what's a concept that we could do? The Krebs cycle, right? If they didn't understand the Krebs cycle, a student that I think should feel bad, right? I will shame this student in my head. I don't understand the Krebs cycle. Can you explain the Krebs cycle to me? I'm shaming you. That's a stupid question. Okay. You in chat, if you're a student, keep that in mind. If you ask something like that, your teacher will think that's a stupid question. How can you improve that question? Well, try to identify what about the Krebs cycle you think is confusing, right? I don't understand how energy flows in the Krebs cycle. Much better question. That's not a dumb question at all. Let's go over energy flow. Let's focus on that. But if you just treat your teacher like ChatGPT by going, please explain the Krebs cycle, that's a bad use of everybody's time. And you've given up the autonomy needed to figure out the answer for yourself, which is terrible. Thank you so much for the 10 gifted. Deep Sheep 6, thank you so much. That's awesome. Thank you. Sick. I've got to jump, but thank you for the stream and the mention of Sjogren's syndrome. Watching all of House MDs finally came to use. Can't wait to catch the VOD later. That's awesome. I didn't know that they had that on House. That's amazing. And again, thank you so much for the 10 gifted. Be sure to thank Deep Sheep 6 for the membership. Thank you so much. Now you can all watch these non-science content on the channel, get access to the emojis. But yeah, thank you so much. Huge. Where was I? Yeah, it's stupid questions. Yeah, if you come posed with like a focused question, I don't understand the energy flow. Perfect. Let's go over that. Or I don't understand the location in which these reactions are happening. Okay, then we can interrogate that further. But if you just come with I don't understand X, please explain it. It's just like this is not good. And that to me is an example of not having clarity of thought, right? Because if you don't understand the Krebs cycle and you can't even tell me why you don't understand the Krebs cycle, you don't understand anything. Your brain is a static is a video of static imagery, you know? Like I need you to lock in a little bit and think about what you don't understand in a metacognitive format. Right. You need to think about the way you are learning. And like, you know, it's fine if you've done this before. But now that I have told you, chat, you have the responsibility to never do this to your teachers again in the future. Right. And you will see that if you keep this in mind, that is one of the fastest ways to improve your perceived intelligence, self-efficacy, whatever you want to call it, right? To develop a metacognitive understanding of your own understanding, right? What do I understand about the Krebs cycle? That's where that student should have started. What do I understand about the Krebs cycle, and what don't I understand about the Krebs cycle? And if you do that, you will find that you are a lot smarter than you think you are. Okay, and your teachers will think you're smarter too. If you want that letter of recommendation, let me tell you, if that student who was like asking me these dumb questions all semester, even if they got a good grade, I would struggle to write them a letter of recommendation because they're not doing the work that makes them independent. They're wholly relying on me to be their ChatGPT, and I don't want that to happen. I also noticed a lot of ChatGPT users start to treat people as machines when requesting something from them. Some of them directly command do this instead of can you do this. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be very curious to see research that addresses that hypothesis, but I wouldn't be surprised. I guess it's more like introspection. Like intuition is a weird thing. I hope I can get my thoughts across. Sorry, it sounds like maybe no, it's good. See, it's like that's throwing something at me that I can chew on, right? If you make a claim like it sounds like introspection, that's something that I can actually respond to, right? But if there's no introspection, if there's no internal dialogue of like this person's time is valuable and is probably helping some other person trying to understand biology, like I need to make sure that my question is clear, concise, and pointed, not only out of consideration for the teacher but also for my own learning. Like, what is this person supposed to get? If they come at me and they go, I don't understand the Krebs cycle, what am I supposed to do? Like, what is the teacher supposed to do? Where do you want to begin? right? Do you like where, like how? I can't spend the next 40 minutes explaining the entirety of the Krebs cycle to you, so you're gonna have to give me more. Um, and to develop that awareness that you need to do that, like you need to do that in every interaction you have. It does sound exhausting, but if you want to come across as knowing your stuff, you have to be that level, right? And I teach a lot of pre-med, or I taught a lot of pre-med while I was still teaching. And the students that I was happiest with are the ones who have that awareness, of the ones who are like, well, I don't understand how electron carriers actually function. Okay, great. We can spend 5 minutes talking about electron carriers. The students that I was like, you're driving me crazy, are the students who were like, I don't understand how RNA transcription happens. I'm like, oh, I can't believe this. It made me so mad. Yeah. If one can identify the specific issue, one can usually figure out unless it's some esoteric aspect. I mean, that is true, but it's not always true for ideas that are very complex or ideas that are just not clicking. Like I have a lot of sympathy for ideas that just don't click with people. Like Orgo 2, like organic chemistry for me was one of these things that's just like, I understand that I don't know how these reactions are happening, but I am so bad at this that I could not, like, it's not clicking. There's some missing aspect of my cognition that is not working out for me. But then I just ate my bad grade. I didn't make it the teacher's problem. I just ate my bad grade. I admitted I'm just bad at this. I could be better in retrospect because I've learned to learn since then. But like, I think if we want to teach critical thinking skills, we also have to teach introspection as well, right? The ability for students, even if you are like me, I don't think I'm very intelligent. I think I'm average. It takes me an average amount of time to learn a concept. What graduate school has taught me is the process by which best to learn. That is the gain that I got from higher education, is to leverage my average intelligence into being able to punch above my weight, which is something I'm very proud of. But the fact that an average person can do that, it makes it all the more frustrating that it is not being done, right? And it I don't know how to address it myself, right? Like, how do you, like, I think somebody on Karis's stream when I was talking about this had recommended that this intervention has to happen very early in life, and I think I kind of agree, right? Like, I don't think you have to go to college to be told you have a dumb question. I think in high school you could probably be done, but then teachers are so stretched thin that how do you like wrap a critical thinking module into teachers who already don't have time to do the things that they are required to do, right? It is very tricky to be able to force this on a societal level, but if you want to perform in an academic setting, you have to have an awareness. And also, I just think it's like good to exist. It's just like healthy to be able to describe your feelings, right? Like if you don't have emotional awareness, or why do I feel this way, if you're just angry all the time and you don't know why, that's devastating. That's a bad way to live, right? Therapy helps, and I think maybe therapy is like the answer for certain students. It's just like therapy helps you understand the enigma that is your own mind, right? And by developing some level of that awareness, I think it can bleed over into other things that are academic, right? If you know how your mind works, you can best leverage your mind. Yeah. I've thought a lot about it since I've always struggled to build intuition, even now in grad. So I always have to go through the process of why I cannot seem to build that cluster organically. I think you are doing the reps. I think you're doing exactly what you need to do to develop that intuition. So if it is like, and it happens for different timelines. Like I relate to this a lot because for me, a being of average intelligence, there was a lot of self-introspection that I needed in order to reach the same level as my peers. So I think you're doing the reps, and I think that intuition will come in waves and in stages, because now I think I do have a pretty good intuition for biology, data, and whether or not a paper is good or not based off of what I've read. No one is left to tell me I'm wrong is the problem. So I've stopped really growing, because you can only grow when you're being told you're wrong, because I'm definitely not right all the time. So it's a little sad for me to not be in that environment anymore. So embrace getting told that you're wrong now, and then that'll really help you develop that intuition in the future. But you have a very good narrative voice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. The best thing that anyone can do for their learning is learning how to learn, and doing a bit of searching and reading before asking such questions. Exactly. That's the best thing that you can do, is to ask a good question. Something that I used to force myself to do in undergraduate, as like a junior/senior, is, as the professor is packing up, I would try to have one intelligent question. I wouldn't ask them a question if I didn't think it was interesting, because I felt like I needed to do that to develop that level of intuition, which I think was really smart of me to do, to recognize that, like, and it was never a bad question. It wasn't like, oh, can you explain this? I didn't want to just ask so that they saw my face, right? So that they could remember who I am to write me a letter, because students do that. They will just ask you a question because they heard, oh, professors really like it when you ask them questions. And it's like, the unsaid part of that is that professors really like it when they are seeing that you are trying to strike above your weight class. Like, you are asking graduate level questions as an undergraduate. So what I would try to do as a junior and senior would be, I would take in the information and I would say, what if they did this experiment? What would happen then? Or like, have they done this experiment? Even if so, what did they find? I would always try to think, what is the next step? Because that tests my current knowledge. And also, I'm practicing the idea of trying to innovate. Because innovation is also a skill that you can learn, right? If you put because in high school, you don't get to do anything new, and that sucks. But how can you do anything new, right? If you're in high school, you're still learning what a ribosome is. Like, you don't get the right, like, you don't have the space in high school to come up with new ideas, because you first have to learn all the ideas that came before you, in biology specifically. And when you get to undergraduate, okay, now that you've learned what a mitochondria is for the 10th time, and now that you have a pretty good understanding of how the cell functions for your level, now you get to do the fun part. You get to start asking questions. And so if you are an undergraduate and you want to accelerate your intellectual development, academic development, I would recommend, and if the professor is annoyed by this, then don't do it. But you'll find, if you ask a professor good questions, they will love you, right? Try. You might think you're dumb, but try. Every time you try, you do one rep for your brain. And eventually you will get to an intelligent question, and you will know, because your professor will yap your ear off. So please, for me, if you're in school now, try to come up with one good question. And if your teacher responds well to it, keep going until you start developing that confidence. Yeah. Weirdly, studying philosophy is where I started gain clarity of thought. As a younger person, I was able to memorize and answer very well, but it was just that I knew the answer is not the question. I also agree, and I actually mentioned this at the start of stream, that like, studying philosophy will help you gain clarity of thought if you are open to being improved by philosophy. Because I think a lot of students take philosophy as like a gimme class, like they just think it's easy, or it's for their requirements. But if they are not open-minded to having philosophy change their lives, they're not going to learn, right? I wish I took a philosophy class. And the reason why I say that is that, like, part of philosophy is formal logic. And formal logic, for a class, you could just vibe check your way through formal logic. But if you sit down and you're like, I'm going to critically engage with formal logic, I think it can help quite a lot. A lot of tutorials I TA'd for were dominated by ChatGPT answers, and it was such a dissonance when everybody had the answers to a problem while the biological discussion had to be built up from zero. Yeah, that's why I think the meta, if I had to predict, is going to head into more oral assignments for universities who want to maintain a good reputation. Because if a student cannot talk about what they're doing, they don't understand it, period. And that penalizes shy students, but you know what? In the world of academia, you can't be that shy. I don't know about the working world, the professional industry, whatever, but I assume it's the same thing, right? University is supposed to help you get better, and part of that is getting to talk about what you do and don't know. That's a broadly applicable skill set that will help you no matter what path you choose to take. Hey, yo, what up? I also finished a 3.5 hour Blender stream and exhausted. How did you ever do 24 hours? Hey, Brady, welcome. Brady, the inventor of molecular nodes here in chat with us. So if you've seen Clockwork's videos or anytime I render a molecule in 3D, it is thanks to the package that Brady put together. How did I do 24 hours? I was born for this, man. I love yapping. And I also built up to it, right? Like 1 year before that, I did a 12-hour stream. And I've also like done a lot of theater as a kid. So just like I was born to yap. I also was like literally falling asleep in the last few minutes of the 24-hour stream. So, you know, pretty exhausting. But I think as you yap, the processing power it takes to keep on yapping is a lot lower than when I began streaming. Like you can go back in my channel and watch my first streams and how strained and uncomfortable all those were because my brain was working overtime thinking about what to say. But if you just keep at it, like much with any muscle, it gets easier. And it also helps that I have a very active chat, which I'm very happy about. Yeah. Let's see. So ask the questions to your book/resource. Then if one part is breaking it for you, then ask that. Yeah, I would say if you test yourself first and try to break your own understanding, like if you can identify where your understanding is breaking down, you've given your teacher a great gift. They will love you for that. I think breaking my focus on reciting the correct answer was dependent on me having questions with no correct answer. I am grateful that I had mandatory philosophy now because that helped a ton. Yeah, like getting to the edge of innovation. That's why I'm like, I can't really conceive of a class where we pick apart a nutrition paper because there's always going to be somebody with a different interpretation. And because science is predictive and not prescriptive, you can't grade on correct versus incorrect. You can grade on well thought out and poorly thought out, but that can be contentious as well. Have a great day, all. Love the channel, Fi. Thank you so much for coming to hang out. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for chilling with me. It's a lot of fun. I love getting to yap about meta, the meta of learning and teaching, because it helps me feel connected to the job that I once had, because I wouldn't consider myself a teacher these days, all right? I'm a communicator, I'm a content creator, but I loved teaching. I loved getting to diagnose a student's learning issues, right? Because there's an aspect of like, okay, a student is struggling, and I have a lot of fun with identifying where in their understanding of a problem they're breaking down, because it's relatively straightforward on how to do that, right? Like the thing that kills a student's grade is usually not understanding. The thing that kills a student's grade is usually the willingness to do work. Because the like, and that sounds rude, and but I'm gonna quantify that. I'm gonna quantify that. So hold your pitchforks, right? I think every bad grade that I got was because I didn't try hard enough. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I could have gone to office hours. There were plans that I could have done to be able to raise my grade. Now, that doesn't excuse the university setting from bad teachers. I have had bad teachers before. I don't blame my bad teachers, however, because they provided the information and I just didn't have the skill. It was a skill issue. I just didn't get to the point where I could learn the information. I was presented a challenge and I failed, and that's totally fine. I don't blame them, even if they were bad teachers, right? And I think the fun part of teaching for me is not necessarily being better teachers, because I don't, whatever, but like it's fun seeing where understanding fails, because those teachers had no incentive to help me, right? They're too busy, whatever. Again, that's why I'm like, university, your share of bad teachers will actually help you become a better learner, because if they don't provide you with all the training wheels, you're gonna have to figure out the information on your own, which is good. Okay, that's what I mean by like, you might take some L's in college, you might be salty about it. I think it's fine, right? I took L's in college. I was upset back in the day, but in retrospect, those bad teachers where I had to do all the learning on my own, it really taught me how to teach myself, which is going to be a skill that you need to survive in the modern world, right? And so when I say that a student's bad grade usually comes from a lack of ability to do all the work, I mean, that's by definition true, because the understanding is actually the part that the teacher can help the most with in the power that you have, right? So the grade doesn't come from, oh, I understand this concept. Is, oh, I didn't do the question correct. I didn't, write the essay. I didn't do the problem set correctly, right? But in terms of diagnosing where a student doesn't understand something, you can actually do that in the classroom. And I think most professors, even bad professors, will help you in understanding in an office hour setting, right? Like, can we agree on that? Like, even a teacher who is reading off of a slide in class and does not care, if you show up to their office hours and ask them a pointed question about your understanding of the material, even a bad teacher, because there are mandatory office hours and it is stuff that they enjoy, they will help you, right? The challenge with getting a good grade is then taking that and then applying it to the rest of the class, which usually involves, you know, and again, this doesn't apply for every class. There are some extraordinarily bad classes out there that have made national news for being total dog water, right? But those are not that common in my experience, right? Bad teaching was just like slides and reading, but that's actually fine in my definition. A bad teacher has to be so bad. They have to be like non-communicative in office hours. They have to be unhelpful in office hours, right? You know, okay, let me quantify it. I think the only way for a teacher to be truly bad in my eyes, from a reasonable perspective, is if they don't help you during office hours, because that's the last refuge. The rest you could chalk up to, you know, you can teach yourself how to learn. That's what college is for. You can assert your own independence, et cetera, et cetera. You can ask for more resources. There are support structures in college that are also available. If your teacher is not helping during office hours, I think that's where I draw the line. Is that fair, chat? I want to hear your thoughts on that. I noticed in education that teachers are reverting back to paper assignments because you can't ChatGPT paper. At least that'll still, even if you did put the thing in ChatGPT, it would still force you to write the words, which is still engaging in the material, which I think is an interesting meta shift. Yeah. Oh, OMG, it's the Blender song, guys. So true. Was that auto-tuned, by the way? It was, I don't believe it was auto-tuned. I didn't mix it. I had my friend mix it. Friend of the channel, Keko Gecko. But there were audio effects added, all right? Compression, you know, fancy things like that. But I don't think it was technically auto-tuned. Although I did ask them to auto-tune it, but they were just like, auto-tune sounds bad, so just re-record it and do better. And I was like, okay. I will just re-record and be more accurate in terms of pitches, and I think it worked out pretty well. Yeah. What's Phi's job IRL? I'm a YouTube creator. That's my job IRL. I used to teach at a university. Do college grades matter if you can pass? Depends on what you want to do. If you want to go to medical school or graduate school, your grades matter. Else, it depends. Start playing Arknights. I feel like the only games that I play now that really, you know, engage me are like roguelikes, like Slay the Spire. Love Slay the Spire. You want me to play it because of the pseudobiology? Yeah, I don't really engage with sci-fi biology anymore. I would call those mediocre professors. Yeah. I'd say that like professors who are just doing the slides thing and then you feel like you can't learn in class. It's just like, as now on the other side of that divide, no longer a student but a teacher, I'm like, okay, like I can't excuse that they don't care about teaching, right? They probably don't care that much about teaching. However, my perspective on whose responsibility is it to do the learning, it's like, even though you pay tuition, what are you actually paying for? You're paying for an education. And sometimes that means learning how to learn on your own. And a bad professor, a mediocre professor, can still teach you how to learn because you are left so underwater. Now, you are definitely not getting your tuition worth if you go to their office hours and they still don't help you. That's where I think you are right in complaining. But if you're complaining because your teacher does the whiteboard thing, I think you can complain. That's valid. I complain all the time like that. Like, I hate learning. Like, the reason why I don't like biophysics is because my biophysics professor just derived formulas and didn't attempt to make it consumable. But I would not call them... I don't begrudge them for doing that. I don't hold it personally against them. I just grumble about it because I thought biophysics was cool and I did not enjoy my learning experience. But I wouldn't like go so far as to try to get them fired from their job, right? Because I want to be very careful about the wrath of students having impact on teaching professors. You know? Yeah, I think that's fair. I had a good time with office hours support, but if that weren't, it wasn't able to even help. That's when I wasn't learning the material. I was only learning how to argue. Yeah, exactly. Like it's very frustrating. And if in office hours you are still not learning, then I'm very sympathetic. I think another kind of bad teacher is those that kill your motivation. Had a biochemistry teacher that scarred me a bit and had this almost permanent "you are so stupid" look. Uh, I think I think your teachers, at the very minimum, should give you the respect of being treated like an intelligent person. So I would agree that there are behavioral attitude dimensions that are bad. Yeah, that's a behavioral dimension. That's just kind of crappy. Yeah. When's the next vid dropping? Probably not for a while. I have a bunch of life stuff I need to do. Open stream today just to have a chat and have some fun. Get to do some content that isn't as stressful. Yeah. We need more teachers like Forrest Falkai and that old Russian lady that teaches physics in a very fun way. Uh, I think they can be a part of your education, right? I think, okay, because I want to be very nuanced with this conversation. Is that friction is an important part of learning, and I would want to see how much actual learning outcome the Russian lady actually has. Because while she's a great hype, I've seen her video. I love the demonstrations. I'm very curious to see whether or not that actually correlates with learning outcome. Because from my experience, just because you are entertaining does not necessarily translate to higher, better grades, deeper understanding. It just makes it so that the students feel like there's less friction. They can feel like they're learning, and then they get really surprised when they do poorly. It's like, well, I thought I was learning, but okay, this is my least favorite complaint, or one of my least favorite complaints. The teacher is testing us on material that we did not learn in class. This is usually a complaint from a student that felt like they were learning in class. They're like, okay, the lecture's going on, the teacher's doing a good job, they feel like they're learning, but then the test comes in and like, I don't know what this is. I've never seen this before in my life. This is so unfair. And then they write a terrible review, right? When in reality, what I think is happening is that the teacher is doing a great job in lecture, but then the bridge between lecture understanding and actual practical use cases is not there. That could still be the teacher's fault if they didn't provide the bridge. But in cases that I have seen, the bridge was provided. It's just the student thought that they didn't need to walk across the bridge, right? The student thought, because lecture was so easy, I'm going to ace this test. When in reality, lecture is easy because the teacher fooled you into thinking you were learning. When in reality, the real learning comes from you doing the homework very diligently, from you doing practice problems very diligently, from you checking your own understanding. And then the teacher giving you a hard exam, expecting you to do those things on your own. When you fail like that, that's what makes it feel extra bad. To use my biophysics example, like, yeah, I held it against my teacher. I'm saying I was this student. That's why I have this dual perspective. I blamed my teacher because they were just deriving formulas. That's not very helpful, which is true. It's not very helpful, right? Because you need to provide cases and applications. But a lot of these physics and math people figure, oh, if I just derive the formula, the students should be able to think through the problem clearly. When in reality, biologists vibe check a lot of their understanding a lot of the time, because biology, the volume of information you have to learn is so high that we just don't think as commonly in that way. So the bridge was never provided, but the content was there. The tools were there. Deriving the formula, you should be able to figure out the exam. So it is my fault that I never got to do that, because I never bothered to check my understanding. And I did go to office hours and they were kind of helpful, but like in office hours, I was like, I need a dedicated TA to help me with this. And there was no TA in this class, right? That's like where some of that disconnect comes from, where like, yes, technically the material was provided, but because the bridge was not obvious, the exam feels like whiplash. And like, I know how unfair that can feel, but coming from the teacher side now, I'm like, Yeah, that's what office hours are for. And that seems mean. And again, I was once in your shoes, so I get that that feels very unfair. But with the perspective that I have, it's like you really have to grab your own learning by the reins, because that makes you a better advocate for yourself. If you are so passive in your life where you feel like teachers have to give you all the tools and bridges and connections, then you are not learning how to be self-sufficient, which is one of the things that you should be learning during college. I had a teacher for marketing where I think I had the highest score of 79. She gloated about it, and that was frustrating. I went to office hours and spoke to her, but she spoke to me like I was dumb. Yeah, those professors have a problem. I agree that like you should not be proud of tanking the student GPAs. There are some professors who have that kind of ego problem of like, I made my test so hard that the students can't pass. The class that I taught from perspective was like 50% A's. Sorry, it's like 40% A's, 50% B's, and then the rest were C's and below. And that was fine. That means for the standard that we set out, the content that we want you to know, you learned it and you should be rewarded for it. I think like arbitrarily setting that standard is kind of harmful, where I think what should be normalized is like, what is a fair knowledge base for our students to have, and then not curving, right? Coming from the perspective of what makes you the most competitive student when you graduate from university, what do you need to know? And I'm going to test you on that information, and then just don't curve. If people do well, you did a good job. Then you know, the curving is just silly to me. What's the general work process behind the video? It's so cool that you hook clockwork into it. I have a whole list, a Google document of like every interesting idea in biology that I've come across. And it really, like, the process of starting a video usually comes from like a hook, an interesting, compelling framework. Like you know, several other YouTubers have said this before, but like it starts with a thumbnail, right? I knew like I didn't want to work on the video. You can ask Clockwork about this too, because I told him like I'm not comfortable doing this video until I can think of a thumbnail that will gather people's attention. And I was like, oh, instead of Hep D, maybe I should have a thumbnail that has the word superinfection, which I think is very compelling because it sounds compelling. And then it's about building the story from there. If I don't have a fun way to put myself in the video, I think it's less good. So if I come up with a way to frame one of the ideas, because there's no like set order, right? But all of a sudden I'll think, oh, this is a framing device I can use. That would be a lot of fun. And then I just pick the video and I do that. Like, to me, what I want for every video to feel like is like you opening up a little surprise bonbon where you don't really know what the flavor is on the inside. You know you're getting chocolate, you know it's going to be tasty, but like I want every video of mine to feel very unique. And that doesn't always happen. And I've been trying to incorporate more of my unique character in these videos to make sure that each video has the unpredictable bonbon flavor to it. So there's not really a rigid process. It's just maybe one day I'll just get hit with like, oh, this is the framing device I want to use for this particular idea that I have in my list. And then I go from there. Yeah. I had a terrible grade in microcontroller class, fantastic grade in microcontroller lab, and was recommended by the lab TA to be a TA. Maybe I should have done something better, but I still think the class is flawed. It can be incredibly flawed. I'm only giving you this perspective because I have the perspective from the other side, but I had the same exact feelings as an undergraduate that like, if I'm paying tuition, I am owed a good learning experience, when the reality is I am owed a good understanding. I am afforded the opportunity to have my understanding improved. And it gives you a better sense of humility in that kind of way. Because college is a challenge. It's not a service, it's a challenge. And undergraduates who step up to plate and bat are the ones who do the best. I'm not excusing truly terrible professors, but I think what I see on social media is an over-eagerness to label all teachers who do the PowerPoint slide thing as terrible teachers, when that's just like not true. Like, I don't believe that is true. I think we should be very careful about who we label as terrible. I would say the professor who highest grade 79 and treats you like dirt in office hours, we should reserve terrible teacher for professors like that. And those are rare. They do exist, but I think they are much rarer than teacher who doesn't care and is phoning it in, which I think is fine. It's fine that a teacher phones it in, because it affords you an opportunity. The rage happens. The true, like, this is a bad teacher is when you are giving it your all, your honest effort, going above and beyond, and you still can't succeed because the other person is sabotaging your efforts. That's truly bad. We should reserve sabotage as being terrible professors. Everybody else, mediocre. I think that's fine. And then, of course, you have good professors who really care and will help you a lot. Yeah. Thank you very much for doing what you're doing. Thank you for being a part of, just coming up to show up and having a chat with me. Super have to agree. I'm constantly impressed by the size and complexity of the abstract machines you bio people reason about. Way bigger than virtually anything I do as a pro math guy. The thing is that there's a lot of mutual respect, I think, across the STEM disciplines, of like the way that, you kind of have to vibe check a little bit of biology. You have to be comfortable with vibe checking. And I know a lot of math people are not comfortable with vibe checking anything, and I respect that because it is, very thorough. I have math envy. My dad was a math person, but I did not inherit his love for mathematics. But I do have a great respect and appreciation for math, because it is the cleanest way you can think. Like, speaking of cleanliness, there's nothing cleanlier than a mathematician's proof, right? Even if it's 7 books long, it is still probably very clean. Compared to the way that we think. But I like the grit of biology as well. I think it's compelling. But I do have a bit of that envy for disciplines that are cleaner. Yeah. Oh, I'm so behind in chat. This always happens when I'm getting on a soapbox. Yeah. I spent learning psychiatry from Dr. K and other doctors on YouTube during COVID. Then I studied pharmacy to get the gist of pharmacokinetics. Then I discovered clockwork and you a month ago. It's an awesome path, I think. I had a crazy psychology teacher that used ChatGPT for all of making slides, writing lectures. Oh, yeah, that's bad. Okay, that is fair. I will amend my previous statement, because I forget that professors can do that. That is a very fair addition to the criteria of what is a bad professor. If you have a professor who is injecting nothing into the teaching experience, I would say that is in fact bad, because they are not even curating what you're supposed to know, right? Because the mediocre teachers that I'm talking about, they have a list of things that they need you to know. If they are relying entirely on ChatGPT, they're not even doing that, right? Because the purpose of university these days is to make you job ready, which is a newer idea in academia, right? Before it was about being a rounded individual. Now it's about getting you a job. Even professors who I would say are mediocre in their lecturing capability have put critical thought into, like, what do I want a student of this university to know? And even if they do a bad job communicating it, it is still valuable to know their criteria. If your teacher puts no effort into curating what is useful psychology, useful biology, they're not even doing that. And I would categorize that as being a bad teacher. That is fair. Feel free to teach like you're teaching your colleagues. I don't. I teach everybody in my chat and teach. Well, I make content as if I were making it for first year undergraduate students in biology who finished first year biology, right? Which is why when I took that poll of like, wow, more than 50% of my audience doesn't have a college level understanding of biology, which is mind blowing, because I am speaking to you in a way where I assume you have passed biology 101 at the college level. So the fact that there are so many people who come in here not having that, but staying around anyway, is incredibly, it's nice. It's incredibly hopeful, encouraging, motivating. Yeah. Thank you for the conversation. I really struggled in college, but I've always loved biology, so I'm intending to go back. That's awesome. I think that's great. Never a bad thing to learn, as long as you are realistic with where that ends you, right? Like, because I'm very careful to not sell biology as like, oh, the career is so great, you know, because I can't say that. I can't promise you that the lifestyle is good or that the job is good, but what I can say is that it is very enriching. You will not regret learning biology. Um, I think that is fair. It is so wonderful. As a discipline to study for studying's sake, right? Again, I can't say anything about the job market. Yeah. He was adamant that it doesn't make many mistakes and I'm basically an AI, so it's fine. Oh, that's so bad. That's so bad. I feel like your love of a subject can sometimes really depend on the teacher you have. I've always had horrible math teachers. I like math when it's fun or interesting, but not when it's test after test. Yeah, it can happen, right? Bad teachers can turn you away from certain subjects, for sure, for sure. Uh, what else do I want to say about that? I think it's because I saw this tweet by Sykin, who's a VTuber doctor, like a doctor in real life. He had mentioned that like he had an attending doctor who crapped on him so hard he cried twice during his residency or med school rotation with that doctor, and he said 10 out of 10 best teacher I ever had in my entire life. Like the rough around the edges, old school, mean teachers can sometimes be your best teachers. It's like there's like a compatibility issue, where like I don't know, like for some hard knock folk who are resilient and like love a challenge, that kind of hard nosed teacher can be like the best teacher they've ever had, but then that's at the detriment of everybody else, right? Ultimately, teaching is like a two-way conversation. There's a teacher and there's a student. I think my approach is pretty generous though, right? Like I don't know, maybe there are very serious biology students who like don't like my content because I make it too simple, but like you can't please everybody. um I do think the dichotomy is pretty interesting. The nuance, because I agree with you, but again, like adding a bit of nuance into the discussion, because it is the idea of motivating students has always been something that I've been very interested in, and it only recently, within the last half decade, did I realize like because people are so unique, you can't motivate everybody. Because as an undergraduate, I was very cocky. I did a lot of teaching as an undergraduate, where I was like, oh, I just need to find the thing that they like about biology, and like I'll just build them their own lesson plan, right? Like I'll try to find a way to relate the stuff to their experience, and then they'll love biology. And I'm like, no matter how hard I tried, there are just some students who don't like it, or maybe don't like the approaches that I take. Maybe they would maybe they would prefer an approach that I could not take, right? Maybe they want to be mean, like they want to have like a mean teacher. And like coming to terms with the finite capability of my own teaching, I think was important and something I think about even to this day. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Me as a geologist, we drown in uncertainty. Yeah, there's definitely a spectrum. I respect geologists, right? Abiogenesis, I kind of memed on you guys a little bit, right? But it's good natured fun, I think. Like I didn't really the same way I did some good natured ribbing to philosophers, right? But it was just wild reading how much like geologists all hate each other. Maybe that's just in the abiogenesis field. I don't know. It's interesting. If you are a geologist, is there like a broad, like I feel like in molecular biology people are pretty friendly. So having a geologist here is pretty interesting. I wonder what you think about the tension between different geologists, and if you could speak more precisely to abiogenesis, that would be even more interesting. Yeah. Sorry, I just got a text that I have to read real quick. Oh, okay. No, this is just spam. Okay, we're good. Yeah. I appreciate you teaching to as many as you can. I don't always know about everything I study. My focus is marketing, but science is beautiful. Learning a little at least gives me a better understanding. And I think that's perfect, right? Like my initial intended audience was like Bio 101 and beyond, but I think the poll really opened my eyes up to like there are, my assumption is that like okay, how I'm gonna do science communication is I'm gonna treat my audience as if they were intelligent, and I'm gonna hope that a casual audience that wants to be treated like they're intelligent does show up. What surprised me was that 50% number because I didn't think that there were that many people out there that wanted that kind of challenge, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. It's very, very nice. I have a deep non-academic enjoyment of biology. I don't want to be tested on. It's so valid. So valid, right? The fun part about biology is the speculation, the hypothesizing, the experimenting. But if you want to do that with the full love of the game, you have to learn everything. You have to learn about how the actin cytoskeleton is assembled and disassembled. You have to learn about energy flow through the Krebs cycle. You have to learn about splicing and post-translational modifications. You have to learn about everything. But if you come to my YouTube channel, I just give you the exact thing you need at the exact time you need it. And because you're not training to be a professional, that's a perfectly valid way to enjoy biology. Phi, I literally took nuclear engineering for my master's instead of doing mechanical engineering as I originally intended in order to avoid certain professors and take more classes with a professor that I really liked when I took one nuclear class as an elective. I think that's valid. I think that's valid. Because that's like a very practical approach. It's very practical. That's if you are able to love multiple things as once. Whereas like biology, I was like sink or swim. I'm gonna like power through it. There's no way I switch off of biology when I was a junior/senior. Although I was tempted by psychology. I think I would have been very happy in psychology as well. But I don't know that I would have been a content creator for it. I just don't know about psychology enough to know whether or not I would have been drawn to sharing that love. Whereas biology, I'm like, the people got to know. The people got to know about all these things that more popular channels will not cover because there's too much context that you need, right? I don't know whether or not there's another big channel who is willing to go through the nuances of what happens when you get infected with 2 viruses, right? Because you have to talk about so many things about basic biology before you can make that entertaining. But my bet, the gamble on my channel is that there are people like you, 50 or so concurrent viewers and everybody who's going to watch the VOD and who tuned in and left. The gamble is that there are enough people like you out there that will keep this channel afloat. And I think that's wonderful. Yeah. Definitely continue to teach as if we've had the college biology course. I've been learning a lot. Yeah, I've been really enjoying that approach as well because there are a lot of popular SciComm channels out there where, I could do content like that, but I wouldn't have fun doing it. Because I would be hiding a lot, and I don't want to hide anything. The way I describe it is like, I need you to have the same serotonin reaction happening in your brain than I did when I read the paper. And that's more than a headline, right? Like reading a paper from start to finish and putting together the puzzle and having this grand realization about biology, that you have to work for. You don't get that in a 101 simplified way. And so in order for me to have you have the brain blast, you need to sit through me talking about basic biology for you. You have to talk about splicing. That's the thing. If you want to do SciComm, this is a technique that I do all the time, is I will give you the background needed exactly when you need it. I've talked about this before, but the thing that I didn't remember to include was I will pull you down a path of the red herring, like I did in this stream, actually, where I talked about how could superinfection exclusion happen if it is generally beneficial to give yourself up, 8 cousins in exchange for 1 brother, this kind of evolutionary selfishness, altruism. Like, the part of the learning that makes it interesting, the part of molecular biology that is interesting, is to me not the fact. 2 viruses infecting the same cell is not the interesting part of that. The interesting part is what it does to the rest of the story of biology. And if you want to be if you want to do communication like I do, I hesitate to call myself a good communicator, right? Because until I get my silver play button, I feel like I have not enough clout to call myself good. I think I'm good. I feel like I'm good, but like saying it out loud is like different because I feel like I need that 6-digit number in order to feel not silly, right? Because I'm still, as one commenter rudely put it, languishing in mid-tier YouTube. So I'm going to word it very carefully. If you want to communicate like I do, you need to think about the stories you want to tell in the way that you enjoyed them. And that requires a lot of self-introspection. What about simultaneous infections appealed to me? Well, the thing that appealed to me is that it can happen in so many different ways, that no two viruses have the same sabotage mechanism. And also, Delta virus is doing something I've never seen before. And in order for that to sound impressive to you, you have to know how rare it is for one virus to parasitize another. You have to know how rare it is for Delta virus, this viroid that infects mammals. You have to know that it is extraordinary. So you have to put it into context, okay? And I don't know where I'm rambling and going with this ramble, but I think the thing that I want to communicate is that there's like a lot of beauty in things, and I would be very happy to help people communicate that beauty, because I think we are seeing sort of an evolution of content or a new generation of content creators who are, like me, not treating their audience like they need everything dumbed down for them. That they can be engaged at a very high level. And I'm not saying that it's not that this is new, because a lot of the channels that I really like in the past have also done this, right? But I think it's evolving, right? Because Veritasium was doing it, Vsauce was doing it. Like, even though their content is pretty easy to understand, there've always been channel Numberphile. Oh gosh, Numberphile, right? The Brady channels have all done this, where they're taking very high level things and then putting it into context that you can consume, but not really dumbing it down by all that much. And I think the new generation of communicators is going to push that one step further and head into graduate territory, like PhD level territory, as opposed to like, what is Graham's number, what is tree. Like, I think the next generation will push that expertise even further, and then hopefully people will still have that hunger, you know? Hopefully. But yeah. Oh gosh. And God, imagine 3 psych VTubers. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a part of a group called VTheorem. Let me go shout them out right now. If Stream Elements bot is working, well, hopefully it is. There we go. Yeah, so I'm a part of a VTuber group, if you didn't know, where we're all science communicators, and there are 2 psychologists in VTheorem, Mylan and Sidere, who both have overlapping expertise on like the psychology of conspiracy theories, which I think is very, very interesting. And yeah, there's a world where I'm like the 3rd psychologist, because, you know, I very, very seriously considered studying the psychology of food, of the psychology of overeating. I was very, very interested in that as a research subject, because I think eating is interesting because it is a habit that you have to keep yourself alive, so it is necessary. Unlike an addiction like smoking or gambling, you don't have to do those things, but people get addicted anyway. But then like regulation around eating has always been an interest of mine. Why people overeat, why people undereat, why people eat the way they do. And there's a world where I do that research, but I'm happy where I am right now. I would really want to see a poll of what degree or no degree your viewers have. Well, the closest thing is the poll that I put in my community posts a while back, where 50% do not have a biology education beyond high school. And then I think it was like a third have some biology education but not a degree, and then the rest is split between bona fide biology degree holders and then professionals. Is there anything in your field you wish more people knew about? Everything on my channel. I try not to do like, you know, clickbait. Not clickbait. Every YouTuber clickbaits. That's not fair. I try not to do topical biology. I try to resurrect things from the past that the researchers themselves are very interested in, but there's no like bard to sing the songs of their research. So I think I mean, the thing is that the answer to that is just whatever video that I'm going to do next. And I'm not ready to tease what my next video is, apart from the fact that it is a video that I have been asked to do for a very long time, and I'm finally ready to do it. Yeah. So I will tease it, but only after I've made enough of the video where I'm confident that I'm not going to abandon it. You know, I don't want to make a false promise, is what I'll say. Yeah. All right. With all of that being said, I think we are going to call it a stream. Let me go check right now if there's anybody I know who is streaming. Because I always forget that you can raid on YouTube because the streaming community on YouTube is so fractured across time and space that they also make it really hard to figure out how to do the redirection thing. So let's see, is there anybody on Twitch who is streaming right now that I could raid into? Is there anybody on YouTube who is streaming? Let's see. And I've already forgotten how to do it. How do I redirect? God, YouTube, why do you make it so difficult? Why do you make it so difficult? Yeah. Unboxing video when? Oh, it'll happen. It'll happen. But the will of the people are not there yet, right? The will of the people have not deemed the unboxing to actually happen quite yet. Which, you know, what can you say? What can you say about that? Oh my god, please. How do I redirect? Oh my god, I really don't know. I really totally customization. Redirect, great. All right, who is streaming right now? Cool. Nobody's streaming right now. That sucks. I guess we can do a cross-platform raid into Shiori Pawn. So Shiori Pawn is streaming on Twitch. She is a surgeon VTuber, and occasionally does surgery content for YouTube, which I think is very, very interesting. So let me go ahead and come up with a raid message. Where's the micro emote? Let me do a raid message. So I'll probably hang out in her chat a little bit. I think she's playing a fighting game right now. And then I'm gonna go have some lunch because I'm very hungry. So if you would be so kind as to join me for a cross-platform raid. I will be there in just a second. All right. All right, I will see you there. Thanks for coming to hang out with me. Bye, y'all. Goodbye. Bye-bye.